Okay. Okay, this is the public meeting of the Palo Alto Unified School District School Board on Tuesday, February 14th, 2023. The board met in closed session and took no reportable action. Before we get to our agenda, I just want to inform the public that Mr. Collins informed us this afternoon that he will be participating remotely this evening. Following the requirements of AB 2449, he has provided just cause for this, namely due to a potentially contagious illness, not COVID. I am not able to attend tonight's meeting in person. So he is joining us over Zoom. That is all. So can I get an approval of the agenda order?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. Student preferential board votes?
Aye.
Aye.
Colleagues, all those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Collins, are you there?
Madam President,
Yeah, do we have to take roll call because you're not in
I
person?
believe, yeah, we do have to take roll call. My apologies.
Okay. Dr. Austin, how would you like to take roll call?
We can do it a couple different ways. We've had the vice president run that in the past. I've run it sometimes. We could do it any way you would like. You could do it, whatever works.
Oh, if I could do it, I'll just do it. Okay.
Sure.
So we'll start on Zoom. Mr. Collins? This is for approving the agenda order.
Sorry, I was on mute. Aye.
Okay. Ms. Siegel?
Aye.
Mr. Dara?
Aye.
Ms. Ledermerrick?
Aye.
And I am an aye. Okay.
Reminder of the student preferential votes.
Oh, and Ms. Sia?
Aye.
Mr. Pan?
Aye.
Great, okay. I just wanted to start the meeting by acknowledging the tremendous loss the community experienced last week at the passing of Melissa Baton-Caswell. Melissa served this community in countless ways over the decades, including serving 13 years on this board. While on our board, she was active at the county and state levels in advocacy for our district and for a strong education for all students. She was involved in the PTA and PTAC before her service here on the board, and she continued to serve her community through her work with countless organizations, YCS, ACS, her own business pursuits, and advocacy work. Melissa touched a lot of lives here in Palo Alto and beyond, and will be sorely missed by many. We send our deepest condolences to her husband, Lee, and her kids, who she loved more than life itself, Lainey and Cass. I was going to ask for a moment of silence, but I think I should give any other people a chance to speak before we do a moment of silence, if no pressure, but I don't know if anyone else had anything they wanted to say. Okay, should we take just a moment of silence and recognition in memory of Melissa? Thank you. Okay. From there, go on to student board member reports.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel, and I'm the GUN student board rep. These few weeks have been very busy for GUN. We had our spring club fair where students gathered at the senior quad to learn about different clubs. Because it was raining on Friday, we moved the second day of the spring club fair on Wednesday, the week after. The same week, we hosted our electives fair where teachers presented about the electives where our students should choose. We also had our TEDx event on Monday, where we invited many speakers from all around the world to speak to our students to inspire them all. Our special guest, one of our special guests we had was Esther, I'm going to butcher the last name, but Wojcicki, yeah, who is like the mother of YouTube CEO and also 23andMe founder and more. So that was very cool to listen to her talk about being a parent. Gun elimination also ended this week as we crowned our winner. For those who don't know, gun elimination is a game where students have to go around campus to tag their assigned targets. The person with the most amount of eliminations and is still alive at the end of the 2 weeks is the winner. Our winner this year, who was also the winner last year, was Kira Shu, who had 24 eliminations. And it's actually like really hard. I played and I got eliminated on the first day, so. Anyways, this year we also had the start of our Black History Month events, including different panels, lunch events, and more. This week is also our Love Week. Yesterday we handed out mathematics, which is basically where we have students fill out a survey, and they will receive a sheet of people's names that have similar personalities, interests, and likes. And today, on Valentine's Day, we had a fake marriage ceremony on the quad. Students could come onto the quad to pose in front of a flower arc and kind of like fake marry their friends. They got carnations and marriage certificates to certify their love for each other. And on Thursday, we will have our winter semi-formal that is also themed Valentine's. Tomorrow night, we'll have our gun student staff choir show, and everyone is invited to come. The tickets are going to be sold at the door. GRT has also started the build season and are starting to dye their hair red to match the gun spirit. Sports-wise, it's kind of funny because every time we report something about Gun and Pally, we always lose. But we lost again to Pally at our basketball game. It was very intense because we were up 20 points in the last quarter, and Pally turned it around. But it was a very fun and entertaining game, and we had everyone there said that it was a lot of fun, and the halftime show was also very interesting. Cheer attended national competitions and won first place in one of them in Las Vegas. And we also had our senior nights for cheer, dance, soccer, basketball, and other sports. But yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Johanna, and I'm the Pally board rep. Pally has been equally as busy since the start of the semester, so here's an update so far. With today being Valentine's Day, ASB distributed Valograms, which are small stuffed animals with candy, to over 400 students during our second period today, as well as patched out our matchmatic results so students could see their matches. Today concludes our Love Week festivities, which were last week, and we hosted the bulk of our events last week during lunch. For Love Week, ASB decorated the entire school with heart garlands and sticky notes that had sweet messages and puns specific to the school buildings written on them. Some of my favorites are some picket lines that they wrote. One of them is, if you were a fruit, you would be a fine apple. And I'm learning important dates in history. Want to be one of them? They're definitely very entertaining to read across the halls. Our Love Week last week events included friendship bracelet making, appreciation note writing, and Love Week karaoke. Last Wednesday, the Wellness Center and our RISE Club also partnered to put on a letter writing event to show compassion to sexual assault survivors. We ended the week with a Love Week Polaroid photo shoot with a backdrop being created with paper hearts, as well as having ring pop proposals so students can pick up some ring pops and propose and take photos with that. Our sophomores also held their boba social after school last Friday. ASB hosted our annual winter rally on Wednesday, February 1st, where band, cheer, and dance performed, and staff and seniors went head-to-head in a basketball game. The staff won 14-12, and we ended the rally with our prom location reveal video, where we announced that the prom would be at City View in San Francisco. The day after, we had our Club Day 2, where we showcased our 19 new clubs for the second semester. In our arts department, Pally Choir hosted their Pops concert last Thursday and Friday with solo, a cappella, and group performances of crowd favorites like Poker Face, Material Girl, and lots of Taylor Swift songs. I attended last Thursday, and the performers truly blew the roof off the pack with their incredible pieces. And our production of Mamma Mia is also starting to load in this week, with the first performances being March 3rd. Going into student activities, our RISE Club has begun training for the consent education workshops for underclassmen in collaboration with One Love. Our Multicultural and Black Student Union have been hosting Black History Month events with a green, yellow, black, red dress-up day on February 1st, a primetime Black History Month poster-making event, a discussion on mental health in the Black community last Wednesday, and posters of Black historical figures featured around the school. Our Bananagrams Club hosted a Bananagram competition during Prime on February 8th, and our Flowers for Palo Alto Club distributed flowers on February 6th. And lastly, our Altruism Club hosted their Trash to Treasure event at the Palo Alto Art Center last Saturday, where students could upcycle clothes and paint with leaves and more. Our Science Olympiad team went to their Berkeley competition last Saturday, and our speech and debate team will be going to their Berkeley tournament this weekend. In general school life, all of our publications have had production, with the Campanile being distributed today. Our freshmen, sophomores, and juniors are going through their course selection in their advisory classes, while seniors, on the other hand, on top of senioritis, are beginning our senior superlatives, which include titles such as Best Dressed, to Always Need a Ride, to Most Likely to Make It to Broadway. Seniors have also been putting up our college letters to previously known as the Wall of Rejection, now rebranded as the Wall of Redirection, which is an annual Pally tradition that allows seniors to support each other through the college process and just destigmatize the very normal experience of getting a college rejection. And lastly, with athletics, winter sports are closing out with their senior nights while spring sports are starting their preseasons. And our very own cheer team is heading to Anaheim for nationals in late February. And that's all from me today. Thank you.
Wow, a lot going on, you guys. Thank you. Superintendent's report.
Sure. First of all, I just want to, again, it's not my first time, but I want to thank our student board reps. Not only do they always come with information and prepared, but the part you guys, on TV and the audience don't get to see is how prepared they are to participate in our meetings in general. Each board meeting night, I meet with our board reps at 4:30 and we go through the agenda items. And there are years when I need to walk through each item and explain them in depth. And with our two now, we usually just start with, how are things going? You guys having a good time in high school? Because that should be important still. And then ask where they have questions. And they go all over the agenda and have their questions pre-marked and their work is done. And it's just another thing that we take for granted here. It's not typical. And really appreciate both of our student board reps. With that, I've been reminded, I don't know, about 100 times today that once again, I've scheduled a board meeting on Valentine's Day. So I'm going to stop my comments now so we can get to the agenda items.
Thank you. Okay, next we have the approval of the consent calendar. These items are considered routine and will be approved in one action without discussion. If a board member requests an item to be removed from the calendar or a citizen wishes to speak to an item, it will be considered under action items. Do I have a motion on the consent calendar?
A motion, we approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Okay, we're gonna take a vote here. Ms. Saya, preferential vote.
Aye.
Mr. Pan, preferential vote.
Aye.
Mr. Collins, preferential vote.
Aye.
Oh, no, actual vote. Ms. Siegel,
Aye.
Mr. Dara,
Aye.
Ms. Lettermerrick,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. But I changed the order of the agenda because I skipped open forum. So now we're going to go back to open forum. Approval of the consent calendar is approved. Doubling back to open forum, we have two commenters. I think both are in person, Ken Horowitz and then Stephen Davis. Sorry about that, Mr. Horowitz.
Good, thank you for the opportunity to address you. I just wanted to mention two items that are passionate for me, which this board has focused on. Number one is Cubberley, and I plan to attend the liaison meeting on Thursday. I couldn't help thinking about the earthquake in Turkey and Syria and the fact that Cubberley is over 80 years old. And I'm hopeful that finally there's going to be some movement on Cubberley. The city council met last night to talk about priorities. As you know, there was an election in November. A lot of the new members are interested in what's going on with Cubberley. So I hope, and the superintendent, Dr. Austin, mentioned at the last liaison meeting that he was going to clear his calendar and this is going to work on this one for 2023. So I hope you move on Cubberley. And then the final thing is anti-sugar. And you may, and I should tell you, I sent you some documents from the Cubberley committees that met back in 2013. It's a 151-page document, but it has a lot of good information in there. But the other thing about anti-sugar, you may be aware of that the FDA just introduced some new nutrition standards regarding sugar. They obviously want to reduce the amount of sugar. I serve on the Health Advisory Commission, and we're seeing a lot of young kids that have prediabetes and what we call fatty liver disease. So anything you can do as a school board to reduce sugar in your school meals, please do so. It's going to become an epidemic. Sugar is now what tobacco was years ago. So thank you for your time, and I hope those cookies are sugar-free.
I guarantee you they are not. I believe they are from Antoine's, but thank you. Stephen Davis.
Good evening. I provided a written copy of these comments to the board, so I'll just briefly summarize them. I've been coming to a lot of board meetings over the last year, and we are now in kind of the third, I would kind of call it public blow-up on an issue that may or may not have been routine otherwise. I provided written comments on that also for later. But I was reflecting, and I got some very nice comments from board members and the superintendent, and I appreciate them. But I've actually been going to board meetings even before I moved to Palo Alto, and I was thinking, what is the right number of public blow-ups per year? And I was kind of thinking maybe 0 to 1. Otherwise, perhaps the balance is a bit off between proactive public communication and getting work done. To remind you all, the three that I recall are the issue at Palo Verde with the move, which I thought was correctly and well presented here to the board. But as a person on the PTA, when I went back there, the reaction was people were really surprised and it was awkward. And as the fundraising chair, I will say it was a little extra awkward. And then we had the after-school care program, which I only listened to here as a member. And now we've had we're having the discussion about restructuring parts of the special ed program. And I understand that you guys have to get work done, and I want you to get work done, and I'm all in favor of that. But I think also public input is important, and I think the balance has gotten out of balance. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all for open forum. So on to action items. We're going to 5A, electric school bus purchase vendor change.
It's a quick item, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Chow.
Thank you, Dr. Austin. So this item may look familiar, and that is because it came before the board almost exactly 2 years ago. Since that time, our original vendor has been severely impacted by some supply chain issues and has not been able to fulfill the order for our 2 electric buses. What we've done is worked with Bay Area Air Quality Management District, as they are the sponsor of that grant, to ensure that we could switch to a different vendor and not jeopardize the grant funds. So we've been in negotiations with Creative Bus Sales. They have 2 buses in stock in Southern California. And with board approval of this item this evening, we can issue a PO for those 2 buses in the morning.
Thank you. Do we think that there's not a 2-meeting thing here because we've already talked about the buses? Right. And so this is, okay. Yeah. That makes sense to me. Anybody have any questions or comments?
I just had a quick comment. So we're gonna, I guess 2 quick questions. So we're gonna, I'm assuming we're okay with paying, by my math, an extra like $70,000 because we're guaranteeing that we're actually getting the buses, as opposed to, because when I read the item, it looked like they're saying after August, but that could be never. Right, like we're at least getting 6 months more time and probably more.
So just to clarify, the original vendor, which was Lion Bus Sales, they have extended their delivery timeline to be August. Now that's when some of their first buses will be available to, you know, essentially roll out the door. But that doesn't guarantee that they'll be our buses. So that's part of the reason why we needed to switch to a vendor that could accommodate our order in a more timely manner.
We don't actually know when they're going to be delivered if we stuck with the original vendor.
We don't. It would definitely be after August.
Okay. And then my second question, because of that, I'm assuming we don't, I'm glad that we worked out that we won't lose the grant funds, but we're not in danger of breaching contract, are we? Because they've already breached it by delaying, is that? I mean, if we're canceling a purchase order, do we have a commitment to buy those buses from them, or?
No, we don't, because they have already been in default of that because their timeline is passed.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions? Okay, student board members, preferential vote, Ms. Saya,
Aye.
Mr. Pan.
Aye.
Now actual vote, Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Ms. Siegel,
Aye.
Mr. Darup,
Aye.
Ms. Ledermerrick,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Okay, thank you. Exciting that these buses are coming. I know there's a lot of our PAUSD students that have been waiting for these buses to come so we can see how the buses go, so if we could expand our electric bus fleet, and so I'm glad it's in the works. Okay, moving on to discussion item 6A, draft budget assumptions. I think we're probably going back to Ms. Chow.
Okay, thank you. This is the first draft of the budget assumptions for the development of the district's 23-24 budget. This item is for discussion this evening, and will come back as a discussion item again until final adoption, which will be in April. Next slide, please. So in the process of budget development, we've instilled some priorities that are strengthening our process around budget development. And I wanted to highlight those for you this evening. So in the past, the budget has largely been built on a what we call a rollover budget. It's nearly impossible to build the budget from the bottom up, which of course would be ideal, but we're not able to do that. In this case, we are doing a blended approach in that we are giving a lot of scrutiny over the things that we roll over, as well as looking at things that we incorporate into the budget. We're also very fortunate to have position control in place this year as we build our budget. So that's very exciting because what this does is it allows us to be really accurate in our staffing numbers and our staffing costs. Our salary schedule increases for the current year, for 22-23, are incorporated in the budget and are throughout the MYP. We don't have anything budgeted for the current year for 23-24, and that is normal at this time of year. We also know that state budget decisions that come with the adopted state budget, which follows the adoption of the district budget, may impact our budget, and those things will be revisited at first interim. And we also are working on, with staff, to prioritize budget adds or any budget offsets, and then we'll make those recommendations to the board in April. Next slide, please. So as a basic A district that is in declining enrollment, there are some unique budget conditions that differ from our neighboring state-funded districts. We know that enrollment goes through cyclical trends of growing and shrinking. That's just normal. When we look at this slide, we see a 10-year chart that shows a delta of 2,000 students between the high and the low points. Because our revenue doesn't fluctuate with the number of students enrolled, we need to proactively be judicious in our spending commitments. So kind of similar to what school services mantra about not spending one-time funds on ongoing expenditures, we don't want to overcommit to unsustainable expenditures when enrollment is low and then only have to resort to budget cuts as enrollment numbers return to average levels. So here we see at the right side of the chart, because we have a dip in enrollment, this is an opportune time to build reserves, pay down any debt, invest in infrastructure and deferred maintenance items, and prioritize those one-time expenditures. Next slide. So when building the budget, our goal is to have a budget that reflects the district's values. The 5 priority areas are at the forefront of this process. Next slide, please. So these next items are examples of where we've been able to add or improve the budget while aligning with our priority areas. Serve and celebrate others. We love to celebrate our staff and do wonderful things. So we have set up some clear priorities and parameters within the budget to recognize staff appreciation, onboarding, retirements, and of course, my favorite, the chow down. Also, we are ensuring that staff has necessary resources. So when we look at areas that haven't been previously addressed in the budget, such as refresh cycles for IT equipment, for laptops, White Fleet, which is our trucks and vans, electric buses, those type of things, establishing those so they're clearly defined in our budget. Early literacy, we currently, at this point in time, have a plan for adding 2 transitional kindergarten classrooms next year. That'll bring us up to 7 for our next year's school year. Next slide, please. Under equity, this is something that is just phenomenal to me, but when compared to pre-pandemic times to now with the implementation of the Universal Meals Program, we have seen about a 300% increase in the number of meals that are served to our students. And this is to all students, which I think is really outstanding. Also, the quality of the meals is very high. And our goal under some grants that we've received is to attain 40% of our meals being cooked from scratch in the coming school year. Mental health and wellness. We did a large program implementation last year at this time for the 22-23 budget, and we are sustaining that program. Not only are we sustaining it, but we're adding to that in terms of increasing the stipend rates for our psychologist interns in order to retain those folks and keep the talent in the district. And healthy attendance, we are proposing to add a career pathways and dual enrollment counselor. Next slide, please. So these are a couple examples, or this is an outline rather, of our art, music, and instructional materials discretionary block grant spending plan for our upcoming year. As you can see, there are nearly every student area is being improved or enhanced by this grant. There is also, because this has a discretionary component to it, we are also able to support a year 2 portion of the 7% salary increase to staff. And then also, which was a bit of news in the governor's proposed budget, that even though these funds were allocated and given to the districts in this 22-23 year, there's a possibility of a third to be taken back next year. So we have set aside a retention so that we're able to meet that should that come to fruition. Next slide. So this slide shows the proposed staffing changes. So we have extended the MOU with CSEA for the bus driver benefits, which allows them to have full benefits at 0.875 FTE. As I mentioned in the other slide, improvements to the stipend for our psychologist interns, actually having an in-house child nutrition services administrator to support that increase in meals that are being served, the career pathways and dual enrollment counselor, and adjustments to the director salary schedule. We are also looking at, because of declining enrollment, we want to make sure that we are staffed appropriately and right-sizing our staffing needs to the number of students. So we are projecting at this point in time a bit of savings in those adds and offsets. And that concludes the budget assumptions. Are there any questions?
Okay, colleagues, questions or comments? Ms. Latimer?
Mr. Brianza?
Oh, yeah, wow, everyone had something to say. Okay, Mr. Collins, why don't you get started since you're
Okay, I
up
feel like, sorry.
Thanks for staying home.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me. On the last item, just to clarify the staff reduction, I think I understand that, but I want to make sure, and I want to make sure the community understands. That, is that to be handled through attrition, or how are we going to achieve that reduction?
Yes, that is to be handled through attrition.
Thank you. That was my question. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dart.
Thank you.
Pressure.
I appreciated the priority areas and the breakdown of how we would allocate certain funding into specific things. One question I had, and it's not an urgent question, but looking at the ratios there at near the end of the teacher to student ratios as we have them in the contract, and elementary to high school, I just wanted to know, in light of the offset, as a thought experiment, how much money it would cost to change that number. So for example, if it was 28-1 at the high school level, what would our number be if we wanted to get it to 27-1? Just so I have a conceptual understanding, and I don't expect an answer right now, but just so I have a conceptual understanding of what that looks like for future discussions that the board may have about that.
Ms. Siegel.
And my question was actually similar to that. With looking over the class sizes and then, seeing that we can go certain number over cap to keep, with the intention of keeping students at their neighborhood schools. But, for me as a former teacher, I can tell you that the larger my class size got over cap, the less I was able to connect with my students, be a caring adult, achieve equity, and also get back the grading faster. And, I do hear students saying that they don't know their grades and then they're caught off guard, and that has to do with mental health and wellness. So I just wanted to actually, have that be part of the discussion too. And I would love to know that. My question was, what would the number look like if we were to reduce one as well?
And I'm guessing that's a different answer if it's a 1 to 27-to-1 ratio versus a cap. Those are very different things, right? Because there are certain requirements that students have to take. And if you're capping it, that's a lot more expensive than if you're averaging 27 instead of averaging 28, right?
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. It'll be interesting to know in the future. Yes, Ms. Luttermerick.
Mine is much more of a nuts and bolts financial question. I noticed with the art and music block grant, you talked about possibly a reduction from the state. And my question is, I recognize this would be out years that we're talking about if we had a reduction of $2.1 million. If we assumed worst case that happened, how would that money be made up? Would that be general funds? I mean, assuming we didn't want to cut any programs.
So what we did is we allocated the total less the potential state takeaway. In the event that, should that not materialize, we're now able to give back $2.1 million to those programs.
So, okay, so then I guess my question is a little different. How is the programming changing with the fact that we've taken away that money? Or is that money because the grant's for a number of years, so is that money for the out years?
There is a plan to allocate further funds beyond what is being shown for 23-24, and depending on how much is available. So for example, if that 2.1 becomes available, then we will have conversations with staff about how those extra funds can be allocated to the various programs.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I think that's it. Thank you. I just want to note, you'll notice I have a mask on too, and not COVID, but I'm not feeling well, just trying to be respectful. Clearly, I'm not in my right mind, because first I switched the order of our agenda, but then with our action item for the electric school buses, I didn't take a motion in a second. I just took a vote. So can I get a motion for, just to, cross our Ts and dot our Is?
I move that we approve the item.
I second the motion.
Wonderful. Now I'll re-vote, now that we actually have a motion on which to vote. Ms. Sia, preferential vote.
Aye.
Mr. Pan, preferential vote.
Aye.
Mr. Collins.
Aye again.
Ms. Siegel.
Aye.
Mr. Durant.
Aye.
Ms. Luttermerick.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. And now things are right in the world again. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 6B, SVA Architects.
First of all, I feel great, so thanks.
Hence no mask.
Pretty clear, it's all good. This item will go back again to Ms. Chow. This whole meeting is Ms. Chow.
Yeah.
All right.
I think this is my last item, but thank you, Dr. Austin. So this is a quick item, and it has gone before Property Committee. This is an example of one of those things that as we are basically touching a site, we're wanting to make improvements to areas that are not the scope under construction, so that when students and staff return, they're returning to a really beautiful site, whether their classroom was part of the construction or not. So we are doing some things like carpeting that are outside the original scope, such as carpeting, painting, et cetera, to spruce things up. And what we learned during these recent rainstorms is there's quite a bit of drainage issues at the site. So while the site is completely torn to shreds and we're taking advantage of the opportunity of staff and students being out, we are doing these improvements to the field that requires new drainage and leveling of the field so that the field is in top condition when they return as well.
I like that, coordinating while it's empty, doing the work. Okay, questions or comments? No? Okay, thank you. 6C, is this, oh, yeah.
We do need approval on this item.
Oh, this is for discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
She meant in 2 weeks.
Yeah, in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we need approval. But I think it can come back on consent, yes? If no one's got any questions, great, okay. Okay, so next is 6C, which I do not believe is Ms. Chow. I believe I'm actually going to throw it over to Ms. Siegel because for years, this has been something I have researched, and I'm so happy when Ms. Siegel said she was willing to research it this year.
Yes, I did. I did some research, and I will say all of the candidates were very qualified, and it gave me something to look up to as a new board member when I'm looking over their resumes and their experiences. So this is based on my research. I don't know any of them personally. I also want to put out there. But the 6 that stood out to me, and I looked for what were their priorities. I wanted a range of priorities. I also wanted to make sure geographically that they covered a wide area. And so, and I could talk about why indeed if we want, but Bridget Watson, Sunnyvale, George Sanchez, Franklin McKinley, Jorge Pacheco Jr., Oak Grove, Christopher Norwood, Milpitas, Teresa Baum, Los Gatos, and Danielle Cohen Campbell. And they all have a lot of experience, many incumbents, and very thorough applications too. I did take that into account. If you're going to apply, to do a thorough application. And so when I was able to look through all of their applications and their answers to their questions, those stood out. But I'm definitely open to hearing if other people had different input and why. And I could go into more detail if we want.
Thank you for doing it. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Siegel or any other people that you just can't believe are not on her list? Or okay, great. Then we're only discussing this tonight. This sounds good. Thank you for doing it. Like I said, I agree with you. Anyone that's putting themselves up for this position probably will do a great job in the role. But thank you for identifying 6 that we can go with. Okay, moving on to 7A, ESRI.
Well, before we really jump into the meat of this item, this is a time to not plant a victory flag, but to certainly acknowledge some work that has happened. And I think one of the key takeaways as you get into this, I'm trying not to steal anybody's presentation, but since we do look at them, I do know what they're going to say. It shows progress, and you're going to hear tonight kind of uncommon progress in some areas, which is good also. But really, what I don't want to draw 2 lines between is an adoption of curriculum and the new results. It's a piece, but there's so much more than that that happen. I'm not trying to minimize how important and what a big lift that is, but there's a whole story here that I hope we don't miss through the presentation and the work that's gone into this. And of course, is I'm sure several people will want to put the credit where it belongs, which is with our teachers who have fully embraced this work along the way, even the bumps, and our reading specialists. I had the opportunity just to pop in and speak with some of our reading specialists, I think it was last week, and just to see the way that they're looking at student data and how they'd like to now streamline it, maybe have systems that they can all be on the same systems and approaches, it is powerful. And my last thought before I turn it over is, with the success we're having here, there are reasons why we have been successful when maybe in the past we've had less success in other areas, including this area. It's giving us a great roadmap. So when we tackle the next area and it becomes a priority, we kind of have a sense of how to do it. So as long as the results continue to go in the direction they're going right now, I think it's really given us a roadmap even beyond this very important priority goal of reading. So with that, Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Dr. Austin. On October 11th, Educational Services shared the beginning of the year baseline iReady scores for the Every Student Reads initiative for progress indicator number 1. At that time, goals were presented for the end of the year, administration based on those scores. At this meeting, the board asked that these targeted goals be more ambitious by adding the percentage growth not met from last year's 5% annual expected growth from the Shaywitz assessment. The EOY goals, from the BASS assessment. The end of the year goals were recalculated and shared with the board on October 25th. Tonight, we are sharing the middle of the year reading assessment results, a comparison to our beginning of the year results, and the progress we've made towards reaching the end of the year goals in reading. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Literacy, Danae Reynolds.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Happy Valentine's Day, board members. Elementary Educational Services is in the second year of the Every Student Reads initiative implementation, focusing on increasing the reading proficiency of the following historically underserved groups. I'm pleased to share that our Every Student Reads initiative groups have increased and have exceeded the end-of-year progress indicator 3. The middle of the year results in the second to the last column provide the percentage of students within each ESRI group reading on or above grade level, representing the end-of-year standards. ESRI groups have increased reading proficiency by 11 to 21 percentage points. This graph includes the number of children within the identified ESRI groups at each proficiency level. It informs our work in meeting the PAUSD promise goal of all students reading on or above grade level by the end of 3rd grade. This graph includes the number of children within the identified groups, and the following slides illustrate changes in reading proficiency from the beginning of year to the middle of year for each ESRI group. The number of students reading above or on grade level, 1 grade level below, 2 grade levels below, and 3 or more grade levels below by the end of year standards. African American or Black students reading on or above grade level increased from the beginning to the end of year by 11 students. Pacific Islander students increased to students reading on or above grade level by 4 students. Hispanic or Latino students reading on or above grade level increased by 134 children. Socioeconomically disadvantaged students reading on or above grade level increased by 55 students. 35 additional Hispanic or Latino and socioeconomically disadvantaged children are reading on or above grade level. Students with disabilities had an increase of 46 children, meaning end of the year reading proficiency. English learners had an increase of 141 students, meeting end of year reading proficiency and reading on or above grade level. Overall, the middle of the year Every Student Reads initiative iReady diagnostic assessment results show an increase of 288 students reading on or above grade level from beginning to middle of the year. This graph represents all K-5 students. 654 students show an increase of children reading on or above grade level. And this graph shows all of our students, K through 5, by grade level and reading proficiency within each tier. As the grade levels increase and students encounter more complex text structures and content with which they may not have familiarity, elementary educators are equipped with the latest research on reading and pedagogy, and that's essential in growing proficient readers. Our partners at Curriculum Associates provide the PAUSD the following slides as part of their work with school districts. Helena Graham from Curriculum Associates is here to provide feedback on our iReady growth data from the beginning to the middle of the year in our first year of implementation. Helena.
Thank you, Danae Reynolds. Happy Valentine's Day, board members and community. I'm thrilled to have the pleasure to speak to some of the data and some of, as several of you have mentioned, some early exciting growth that we're seeing here at Palo Alto. While this particular graph has a lot on it, I thought I would just share sort of level set us. So what you're seeing here is iReady median growth for all K-5 students. And what we typically see this time of year is at the middle of the year, we expect about 50%. And as you can see in your Palo Alto data, every single grade level at every single grade band is demonstrating 50% or more growth towards that typical growth. Typically at the end of the year, we expect at the end of the year 100%. And I'm really excited to emphasize in some of the lower tiers, so 2 grade levels below and 3 grade levels below. If you look at those students, they're exhibiting even more growth. So very excited to see this growth here. This next slide looks at the data. It shows both growth and performance. Typically this time of year, we see more schools lower in quadrants. We expect by the end of the year to see all schools in that top right-hand quadrant. And as you can see, all of your schools are demonstrating incredible growth and performance. And I would expect to continue to see more of that growth towards the very tip top of that right-hand corner by the end of the year. And finally, this graph looks at the data a little bit differently. It's by grade level. And again, we're seeing incredible both growth and high performance amongst all grade levels, kindergarten through 5th. And while I might add, you might ask, what about kindergarten? What about first grade? Well, if we can remember, those kiddos went through COVID or this might have been the first time or second time they're taking an adaptive online assessment. So congratulations all.
Thank you, Helena.
Danae, back to you.
Thank you, Helena. And thank you, board members.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds and Ms. Brown. Okay, colleagues, questions or comments?
I can go first.
Sure. Why don't you go first, Ms. O'Hara?
Well, first I just want to start by saying congratulations and thank you, Ms. Reynolds and Ms. Brown and our elementary principals and particularly all of our elementary teachers and students. We expected a lot and continue to expect a lot of you this year. It was, I think, Dr. Austin mentioned a new curriculum, also a new assessment tool, and a lot of eyes and attention focused on the results of this pilot, which means focused on all of you. So you have more than risen to the occasion and surpassed all the expectations that we placed on you. And I'm not surprised by this, but I am incredibly impressed and grateful, as I'm sure my colleagues are as well. And this is supposed to be a 3-year pilot, but you guys may end up meeting those third-year goals this year, and at least in this progress indicator, and then we're gonna have to
And then
come
we'll
up
make
with
new goals.
new goals. So start thinking about that. I'm only half joking, because as exciting as these results are, we are still seeing some big gaps between the targeted ESRI groups and our white and Asian and all student groups. So we have a lot more work to do. But for the first time, really, we have some real momentum, which is exciting. And it's also a huge relief because I've said this before, I know, but it bears repeating as often as possible. When we talk about the opportunity gap in our district being intractable, decades-long problem, what we're actually talking about is thousands of children that we have failed to educate properly over the years. So it's not a theoretical problem or an academic problem or a political problem. It's a human problem, and good intentions are not enough. Impact is really all that matters. So I am so relieved that we're finally starting to see that impact. And my big question, of course, is why? And I think Dr. Austin alluded to some of that in his remarks. And I was going to ask this question at the meeting, why? But I read the staff report, and I think you answered it. I think you did, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. But the sentence that stuck out for me is this one. Following board approval, the ESRI implementation intentionally focused on reading, including Tier 1 instructional practices, curriculum, assessments, interventions, and professional development. And I read that and I thought, yeah, that's exactly right. There's no one reason for this, right? It's a multi-pronged approach, incorporating all of those things that were listed there, but really united under that umbrella of intentional focus. I personally was really glad to see the explicit reference to Tier 1 instructional practices because, you know, the focus on the how of teaching really benefits all of our students, both those who are struggling to read and those who are racing up to the top, right? So we didn't see the percentage increase in that chart for white, Asian, and all students, but extrapolating from the other charts, they're seeing some pretty big improvements too. So that's really exciting. And I also just wanted to point out, I really appreciated that third bullet point under data questions, which gets explicitly at sharing best practices across classrooms and school sites. I firmly believe we have some of the very best teachers in the world in our classrooms, so I love that focus on uplifting them, uplifting those practices to really maximize the impact across the district. So that's those are my comments. If you want to comment on the why beyond what I've said, and you can totally disagree with me too, if you want, of course, but I think we'd all, do we have any idea of why, or is it all of the above? Is that what we're thinking?
I think it's all of the above, and as we move along using this assessment and all our tools, and we have some more data, we will, be able to maybe all of the above, and maybe we need to change some things. So we need more data, we need more time to be specific. But of course, our teachers and our principals have been working extremely hard, and they're focused, and they're into the work. And I think that is the number one thing we need.
Thank you.
Other comments? Mr. Darup.
Sure. I think it's okay to plant a little bit of a victory flag because I think that, that doesn't mean we don't have work to do. But when we looked at this last year, and I think victory in that sense would have looked like any movement.
Anything.
Right? And that was great, and we got that. And so the bar moved, which was now it's going to be consistency in that continued growth. And we saw that. And so I think, our next victory at our next progress indicator is the hardest one, which is more of the same. But it's like, it's more acceleration, basically. So it's not easy. But I just want to say that, I think it's great. And I'm okay with us planting a little bit of a victory flag and saying, hey, we did something that we haven't been able to do for a long time. And we did it once, and we've done it twice, and it's been ongoing, and we're going to continue doing it. And you'll see that again the third time it comes to us. So I just wanted to say, yeah, great work.
Ms. Siegel.
I also wanted to thank staff and thank our teachers. And I also want to just urge a little caution in interpreting this data as nationally too. Kids grow from fall to winter. And so we're looking at a really small subset. And I was trying to figure out when we take this test, and if I went to the iReady website and it says, beginning of school year to November 15th is the first window. And if I misunderstood, please let me know. And then the second window is November 16th to March 1st. And those are, in terms of kids learning how to read, those are really big windows. So I was just wondering if we hopefully have narrowed down these windows, because that concerned me. And also just from having kids in elementary school and talking to them, for my own kids, how has their reading improved? And also, have they gotten better at the iReady system? Because the first time they took it, I can tell you, my son, he went through it as fast as he could to play the games. And he said, Mommy, I was the first to finish. So I don't know, right? We just have to make sure that I hope that we're checking in with the teachers, seeing if they're, how it's going in their classrooms, if the scores that they're seeing align with how they feel like their kids are reading based on the leveled books. And then kind of another question I had is, because iReady, there is a kid, reading to the computer, that component isn't there. So just keeping it all in mind, I'm so glad we made improvements across the board. We should be very proud, but just urging a little caution in planting any flag, because I think this is the first year using iReady, and there could be some nuances.
Mr. Collins?
Thank you. Thanks for this presentation. Appreciate the detailed update. A couple of comments. One is, I do really appreciate the staff report, and I think Ms. Lettermerrick mentioned it as well, the detailed list of all the items that have gone into the ESRI initiative, the Every Student Reads initiative. I think that's a fantastic list. I think it really shows the comprehensiveness of our approach. And as we look around the country at other places that have been successful at really moving the needle in early literacy, that kind of comprehensiveness has been the hallmark of successful strategies. So I think that it was really nice. I thought that list was really well put together. The breadth of effort, the thought that went into identifying all those things, the implementation, mobilization to get all those things going. I think that's what gives me the most enthusiasm for this project, is that you guys are just you didn't just do one or two things and kind of hope that it worked. You looked across the board and said, what do we need to do to change our program to achieve the kind of results we want to achieve? So I thought that was great. Two other minor things. One is on the iReady results. The one I don't like it when we show results for all kids without breaking out by subgroups. Primarily because what that tends to show is our demographics, that we're a community of mostly affluent, high-performing families. And so the fact that we do well on that is nice, but I don't think is really reflective of the contribution of our schools. I mean, we have wonderful schools and wonderful teachers, but I think on national comparisons, we stand out because we have wonderful demographics. So I'd urge us to, show those things broken down for subgroups so that we could see the performance of the subgroups that we're really focused on. Which, by the way, that's a nit, because most of the presentation amply did that. And so I really applaud it. The one thing I just wanted to point out, so Hispanic or Latino, I'm looking at the staff report, and it has the baseline, the board approved goal, and then the middle of year at or above grade level. And when you look at Hispanic or Latino and socioeconomically disadvantaged, which I think is the bellwether group in the among all groups, while we've exceeded our goal of 24%, we're at 34%. 24% at or above grade level is a very low goal, and 34%, while it's well above our goal, is a very low level. That means at 34% that 6 out of every 10 kids in that group are below grade level, more than 6. So we really need to, while we've made progress, I used to have a boss to say, we're 80% of the way there. It feels like we're 80% of the way there, and we've got 80% of the way to go. And I think that may be true here as well. It's like we've definitely made progress where we hadn't made progress before. That's fantastic. We have a lot of progress still to make. So I look forward to seeing that progress in the future. Thank you very much.
Student board reps, do you have any comments or questions? Okay, I've got a few. I'm not yet ready to plant a flag, but I'm very happy with the amazing progress we've made. I know the admin team, all of you guys and all the principals have been working so hard supporting the teachers. But wow, our teachers have had a lot to juggle over the past year, right? I mean, and you just laid it all out in these sentences, right? They were hit with a new curriculum, they were hit with a new, with OG, they were hit with new assessments, all these new professional development. It's a lot. I think it's all good stuff, but it's a lot. So I do hope that we are both checking in on our elementary teachers to see how they're all doing, and also talking to our elementary teachers about whether they're seeing this growth in their classroom, right? Like we're seeing it in the numbers, but are they in their classroom saying like, wow, look how much progress this one kid made, or all these kids are making, or I see a real difference, or this seems to have an impact. I would really love to know what they see as making a difference. And Dr. Austin knows that I was very hesitant at least what I called it was throwing the kitchen sink at it, right? Because if you adopt a new curriculum and get new assessment tools and do new methodologies and all at once, how are you ever gonna know what made the difference? And the researcher in me still has that concern, right? So if we have tremendous success and other districts say, wow, what did you do? And we're like, we did these 18 things that you're never gonna be able to do because it's expensive. Right, like how that doesn't, were there 2 or 3 of those things that made a bigger difference? It might be hard to identify, but that feels like a problem for later because our job is to get all of these kids to grade level, and we are making progress. So I think just paying attention to it and doing all of these things are what made a difference. Also interesting to look at how much progress we made looking at those percentages. You exceeded them in every category. And yet we also changed our assessment, right? We went from 5% increase in BAS to like, hey, now we're gonna change over to iReady. And it's apples and oranges. So it's hard to judge that. But I do think that clearly the goals are so big that we're making progress. As a former elementary administrator, I really like seeing that how many kids we moved from 3 grade levels to 2 and from 2 to 1, because the old trick 20 years ago when you were judged on how many kids met standard was you targeted the kids that were just below meeting standard, and you didn't have the resources to bother with the kids that were 3 grade levels below, because otherwise you were gonna lose your funding or get, it was horrible. So I'm really glad that we're looking at moving everyone and really calling out who we're moving and who we're not moving. I noticed that there are a few groups, and I actually saw one of the bullets, you called them out a little bit, was everyone's making tremendous strides. Obviously still have a lot to go, but specifically it seemed like our students with disabilities and our Black students made markedly less progress than some of the other groups that made 20 or 21% improvement. And so it's still more improvement than we've made in the past. And yet here we are with like another achievement gap forming, right? That like some are really catching up and others not as fast. And I'm just wondering, in some ways we could have predicted it, right? These are groups that we are to have a history of not serving well and not, meeting the needs of. And I'm interested in, not right now, but any thoughts as to why that might be and what we should be doing to close that gap, to say like, hey, if some of these groups can make over 20%, we should be able to do that with our Black students or our students with disabilities too. So what else do we need? Is there other professional development? Is there some other, dare I say, add some other methodology? But is there something else that we could be doing so that everyone can be moving along at the same rate? because what I don't want to then do is bring some up and leave others still behind, especially when, our commitment is to get rid of being able to predict someone's success based on their demographics. And here are at least two groups where still, yes, progress, but not as much progress as everybody else is making. So thank you for all your work, to you, to the principals, and especially to the elementary teachers. This has been a lot, and you're rising to the occasion. And I hope to be able to hear from the teachers that they are really seeing a difference. So thank you for all of your work. Anything else on this? Great. Okay, restructuring plan for special education. Just so everyone knows, because I think that's all of the comments we have here, we will have a staff report on it, and then we will go to public comment.
Good evening, Board, Superintendent Austin, and Executive Cabinet. My name is Cynthia Lolling Perez. I'm here tonight with my co-director, Amanda Boyce, to present to you our department and elementary program restructure plan. The Special Education Department reorganized its structure to eliminate the division of elementary and secondary programs and developed a preschool to adult transition model. The department is led by co-directors who oversee the operation of programs across the district and continue to collaborative relationship with sites, parents, and community. In addition, our team also consists of coordinators and program specialists. We continue to focus on a collaborative approach to systems and supports for students. The department also partnered with our mental health and wellness department in the oversight of our school psychologist. To better understand the structure of the department, we wanted to talk briefly about the roles and responsibilities of co-directors, coordinators, program specialists, and oversight of our psychologist. Each director has our unique as well as shared responsibilities. Together, we support the department's vision and mission. My role includes an oversight of alternative placements, program development, our comprehensive coordinated early intervening services, or CSAs, plan and reports, and mediation and settlements. Ms. Boyce's role includes working with our Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. She is also a liaison between families, sites, and the community as a whole. She conducts alternative dispute resolution, communication through various means such as our director's week in review, newsletters, and updating our website. Coordinators are administrators and support our sites in collaboration with site administrators, while our program specialists provide support directly to staff to ensure compliance with IEPs and students are supported appropriately. In partnership with our Director of Mental Health and Wellness, we provide oversight to our school psychologists together. We collaborate in areas such as professional development, monthly meetings, evaluation, and site support. The focus of our department support is for students with disabilities, while our partner department is support for our general education population. In our department restructuring, we are also restructuring our elementary moderate severe programs. We determined that current span of grades in the moderate severe program is broad for developmental, academic, and behavioral reasons. We do not anticipate any changes in staff and resources. In fact, our desired impact is to increase resources and focus for students. With that said, I would like to turn the presentation to my co-director, Amanda Boyce.
Good evening. Our elementary students in special education are served in a variety of programs. Just to give you a snapshot and a little bit of background, we have approximately 80 elementary students in our moderate to severe learning centers at 7 sites. We have 6 students in our therapeutic program at Duveneck and 6 students at our medically fragile program at Briones. Additionally, we serve approximately 215 students in our mild to moderate programs at all 12 elementary sites. Relative to tonight's board presentation, we will only be discussing changes to the students in our moderate to severe learning centers. Please note the current structures of our moderate to severe learning centers. I'd like to point out that Fair Meadow and El Carmelo have what we are naming a primary and intermediate learning center that serves students in either transitional kindergarten or kindergarten through 2nd grade, and then in a separate classroom, 3rd through 5th graders. Walter Hayes has 2 moderate to severe learning centers that serve kids with varying needs. The remaining 4 campuses, Ohlone, Nixon, Barron Park, and Escondido, serve approximately 7 to 11 students in 6 grade levels that span kindergarten through 5th grade. There are many challenges associated with supporting our students with moderate to severe disabilities in 6 to 7 different grade levels. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act requires school districts to provide specially designed instruction to meet the unique needs of the child, which can be very difficult when you have a vast array of learners in a single classroom. Additionally, in order to promote inclusion, collaboration between the special and general education teachers is vital. They work on analyzing students' IEP goals, assessing progress on those IEP goals, and modifying the general education materials for when the students are in general education. Teachers have reported that being the only moderate to severe teacher on that campus and collaborating with general education teachers across the school from kindergarten through 5th grade is extremely challenging. Transition to middle school can also be challenging when a child in our moderate to severe learning center only has 1 teacher and then moves on to middle school. And some of our most veteran and experienced moderate to severe teachers have indicated that they frequently look at positions outside of PAUSD where there are more traditional primary and intermediate learning centers so that they are able to collaborate with fewer teachers across the school. So we are concerned about teacher hiring and retention. Therefore, it has been the longtime belief of our special education department that there would be many benefits to consolidating our moderate to severe learning centers to fewer campuses. There would be increased opportunities for students to work in small groups. There would be more frequent collaboration opportunities between special ed and general education teachers. There would be more thorough grade level modifications to the core curriculum, a smoother transition to middle school, and improved working conditions for staff. Before determining which elementary campuses would consolidate, our team outlined objective guiding principles to drive our decisions. First, we analyzed enrollment next year to make sure that we had moderate to severe learning centers in our 3 clusters across Palo Alto, the north, the south, and the west. We also looked at how many students are currently enrolled in our kindergarten through 5th grade learning centers in order to minimize disruption of their current assignments and classes when determining which ones would move. We also looked at facilities across the campuses that currently house our moderate to severe learning centers, and we looked at which campuses had available classrooms, preferably next to or near the current learning centers, and which campuses would be going under construction shortly. Finally, we wanted to ensure that we had moderate to severe learning centers on a few of our campuses that would also have transitional kindergarten to make sure that we're supporting our youngest learners. By utilizing our guiding principles, we determined that the best decision would be to move to Ohlone program to Nixon and the Escondido program to Barron Park. As you can see now in the right column, for next year, the 23-24 school year, we will have 2 programs in the North Cluster, 4 programs in the South Cluster, and 4 programs in the West Cluster. We know that this can be difficult change next year for the impacted families at Ohlone and Escondido. However, at the core of this decision was based on what will best support our students with moderate to severe learning disabilities, not only for next year, but in the years to come. There is no doubt that students will be better served in a primary and intermediate moderate to severe learning center. Additionally, in order to minimize the impact on the students and families who will move next year, families have been given the opportunity to request enrollment at any of the 5 schools with the learning centers, request a transfer just for next year of siblings who may want to move with the students to the new campus. We will continue to offer PAUSD transportation for students with moderate to severe learning disabilities from door to door at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And we have offered visits to the new campuses for the impacted families and staff. Finally, our team is committed to spending the next few months supporting impacted families in this transition through one-to-one meetings with the directors and frequent communication. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to public comment now. We will alternate between in-person and Zoom. It looks like we have 11 commenters. If you don't have a comment card in yet and you want to make a comment, please get a card in right away so we have an accurate number. Given that there are 11 commenters, that means everyone gets 1.5 minutes to make a comment. We like to start with an in-person commenter. So the first in-person I have is Lars Smith. And next we'll go to Christina Schmidt over Zoom. And then Yaroslava Krivokin in person next.
So this is pretty emotional for me, so I have my notes out here. I normally wouldn't do this, but my name is Lars Smith. I'm a Palo Alto Unified School District parent. I'm also an alum. I went K through 12 in this district, as did my father. My son Tyler is in the Moderate to Severe Learning Center at Ohlone. He was previously at Barron Park, but moved because of the fledgling learning center there. That has since closed. Now it's going to reopen. He had 3 teachers in 1 semester there in 1st grade. Now he's being asked to move to a 3rd school in 4 years. Ohlone has been a dream come true for both Tyler and our family. He has flourished there, and we actually moved to the neighborhood so that he could be closer to school and he could enjoy riding his scooter and be really part of the Ohlone community and what they have to offer. I believe the Ohlone philosophy and the educational setting allow moderate to severe special education students to achieve levels of inclusion and education not possible at other district schools. There is a long tradition of this at Ohlone. Since I'm running short on time, I'd like to publicly object to the way this was handled. This was not done in the best interest of students and teachers. In fact, they were not included in the process. This was made very apparent in the Palo Alto Weekly when a district representative said parents were not included. This is not how public school is supposed to operate. Public institutions are not supposed to operate this way. The arrogance and hubris of the district and the way that they are doing this is appalling. This is what is called a slippery slope. You're not going to get input because you've already decided what they're going to say. The board, I really urge you to use your powers of oversight to put a pause on this and engage the stakeholders that deserve to have a say.
Thank you. Christina Schmidt, speaking over Zoom.
Good evening. As a parent in PAUSD since preschool family, I have experienced many changes in special education. The challenges discussed today are not new. Many previous directors have attempted to tackle the issues dating back a decade. Redesigning special education program is the responsibility of the district leadership and must take into account student outcomes, best practices, and staff recommendations from many sources. Special education surveys, for instance, professional audits, and painstaking advocacy from parents. It appears to me that the district has developed this redesign with mindful intention. It is the district's responsibility to be responsive to developing challenges and initiate creative solutions to support the unique needs of students and provide opportunities to staff to exercise best practices. As a parent, 12 years ago, I was facing this exact same scenario, and I had to change out of my neighborhood school. Even though it was in the best interest of my child, there was a tangible sense of loss and transition. However, I needed to know certain assurances. Would my child be safe, included in the new campus, and was the teacher, aides, and administration understanding the vulnerable conditions of my child? I am encouraged to find that the 2 schools designated to receive students have principals with longstanding histories of attention to education in special education and inclusion, and I trust that they will usher in this transition to engage families for the best interest of all children. Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate everyone really trying to stick to the minute and a half because I know that's hard. Next, we have Yaroslava. I need you to say your name correctly because I do not want to butcher it. Beautiful. Thank you.
So I echo everything that Lars said about the Ohlone School. I'm a parent of 3 children who currently attend Ohlone, one of whom is in the specialized education program. I was shocked and appalled to hear about the unilateral decision by PAUSD to end our child's program via Zoom call last week. There was no prior discussion of relocation of the program with the affected families or their teacher. This plan takes away the option of choice schools from children with moderate to severe support needs. We will not tolerate this discrimination against our children. Our children are not chess pieces. Moving them from school to school deteriorates their mental health and disrupts learning. I call on the superintendent and the school board to put an immediate halt to this plan until there is a full discussion and input by the parents of special education students and teachers with the final plan discussed by the school board. I also have the support of 286 Ohlone community members who have signed my petition to keep the moderate to severe needs special education program at Ohlone. Thank you.
Is Rika Yamamoto on Zoom? I don't know if she knows that she's next. I didn't give a warning. Rika Yamamoto, is she there now or should I? Do you see her on there, Derek? Yeah, she's
Hello,
there.
good evening. I'm Rika.
Go ahead, just speak up, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, I hear because my son went to Ohlone, so I hear all these stories very directly. However, here tonight I'm here as a chair of the CAC. And so CAC acknowledges this impact the student and family may face as this restructuring plan for elementary special ed has been introduced tonight. Therefore, we ask the district to continue to work collaboratively with the families impacted by this restructuring. And as stated under your resolution of the plan, we urge you that providing alternate options and support the individual student and family needs. From our understanding, district already use these 2 grade clustered learning centers and for the more severe support needs students at several elementary school sites, which that provide in order to provide enhanced support for students. More severe student needs include providing specially designed instruction to access general education curriculum in the least restrictive environment. The education specialists provide intensive instruction and support.
Thank you, Ms. Yamamoto. If you could send the rest of your board, your comments to board@pausd.org, I'm sure we'd love to hear the rest of it. I'm sorry to cut you off. Rowena Chu, and then Marianne Marr and Maria Brown, then Elizabeth Doxey.
Hi, I'm Rowena Chu. Been an Ohlone parent for 6 years. I expect to be an Ohlone parent for another 6 years. Whilst I'm here tonight in support of my friends from Room 19, I wanted to make the point that I think this is a larger issue beyond that affects more than just the families that are in Room 19. I believe it affects the Ohlone community as a whole, and I think it has implications for Ohlone going forward. By that I mean, I believe that the Ohlone Choice Program is distinctive, and I think that access to that program for the special ed community is important not only for the kids who have access to Room 19 so far, but also for the kids to attend Ohlone. Ohlone has thus far been a byword for diversity and inclusion. We in the Ohlone community that are not in room 19 would very much like to preserve that aspect of diversity and inclusion. I think that it has brought a richness to the community that will be a tremendous loss. I think the type of learning and philosophy at Ohlone is particularly important to special needs kids, and to see them in the classroom along with neurotypical kids is important going forward for what choice schools mean for Palo Alto. Thank you.
Marianne Marr, then Maria Brown, and Elizabeth Doxey.
Hi, Marianne Marar, Ohlone parent. During the pandemic, the mental health of our most vulnerable students was paraded around as one of the main reasons for reopening. I haven't heard any mention of the mental health impact on children this time around. What about the mental health of their parents? The siblings who'll now potentially be separated? Were teachers consulted about this move? When were they notified of your decision? Were the implications of this on students who are quote unquote not directly impacted factored into this decision? Or did you assume this hurt only a small percentage of the school's population and that therefore the rest of us couldn't be bothered to care? Did you assume special ed students and their families were the only ones who'd be disadvantaged by this? Surely you must know that some of us thoughtfully and intentionally chose our schools because of the inclusion they promised, not in spite of it. Are the glaring systemic inequities of this decision obvious at all? If so, why? Why not? And if not, why? One thing I know is that the panic and fear you've added to the shoulders of the parents who will now have to bear the brunt of this move is exhausting, isolating, and traumatic. I urge you, this is an opportunity. Don't just talk the talk on equity. It's performative and unsettling. Our kids deserve more. Thank you.
Maria Brown, Elizabeth Doxey, Purnima Gadam, and then Serena Ojakian.
Hello, my name is Maria, and I'm a parent to a neurodiverse child with an IEP at Ohlone, but not part of the program we're discussing tonight. I'm also a parent to a neurotypical child at JLS. Both my children and our family have benefited from inclusivity we have experienced in the 10 years we've been in the Palo Alto School District, ever since the TWOS class in Greendale Preschool. The district alludes that the consolidation is not a budgetary one, but was not shared are the trade-offs that we're sharing with you tonight that we see. With this new plan, most of us, our children, our teachers, our families, our school communities will not be exposed to children who have special needs, who learn differently, who are different from us. This affects all of us. There's a mutual benefit in schools being inclusive of different types of learners. This plan will not fulfill the district's promise of equity and excellence. Children who require additional supports will be absent from most of our elementary schools, 7 out of 12 to be exact. We should be going in the other direction and offering these supports in every elementary school. These families who would be most directly affected by this consolidation are the ones who often feel marginalized. We are making it harder for them. We would not be giving them an option to keep all their children in one school easily, the option to be part of their neighborhood school, to be included. Caregivers of children with special needs need more energy reserves. They have hectic schedules, and I'm going to include myself in this group. We are exhausted. We advocate for children, we take them to therapy sessions, medical appointments, we research and become experts, and we look for ways to best support our kids, and we need more support and not less.
Elizabeth Doxey, Purnima Gadam, Serena Ojakian, then Kathy Howe, Kimber Gage.
Wow, those are hard acts to follow. I want to address things. My name's Elizabeth Doxey. I've been an employee of the district for 25 years. The last 8 years, I've been at Ohlone in the Mod Severe program as an aide. I want to address what we're looking at in terms of the staff and why we think Ohlone is a good fit for this program. We're deeply concerned, and I am speaking on behalf of the whole SPED team at Ohlone tonight. We're deeply concerned about the impact this decision will have on our very special students who thrive academically and socially as an integral part of the Ohlone community. They thrive because the Ohlone community is unique among the district's 12 elementary schools. Ohlone is a choice school, which means the entire community of educators, families, and students has chosen to work together, to embrace project-based learning, to support mixed-grade classrooms, to develop a robust SEL curriculum, to create an inclusive, accepting community, and yes, to nurture and care for our beloved farm animals. This commitment to what we refer to as the Ohlone Way provides growth opportunities for all students, especially those with different learning styles and abilities, and it is not found anywhere else in the district. So in order to appropriately serve our current and future students, we encourage you to rethink your decision and to restructure the elementary special ed program in a way which would allow more students to benefit from Ohlane's very special community. On behalf of all students, we thank you.
Purnima Gadam, Serena Ojakian, Kathy Howe.
My name is Purnima Gadam, and I'm a parent at Ohlone. I was very disturbed by the news that the Room 19, which serves students with moderate to severe disabilities, will be moved at the end of this school year through a decision that was made without the consultation or the consent of the Room 19 families and possibly the educators involved in the daily life of these students. My work sits at the intersection of disability rights, education, and technology. One of the most significant lessons that I've learned is that it is vital that the people who are at the heart of a decision must be the main stakeholders at the table. To make determinations that affect people with disabilities without their direct input calls back the time in which their civil rights were routinely violated by governmental institutions. The loss of Room 19 will ripple across Ohlone like a storm in the ocean, impacting all students. We all benefit from being in community with each other. My son is 9 years old. When he found out about this proposal, he was aghast and said, "This is not the Ohlone way." I hope that the board will seriously reconsider this decision and use their oversight.
Thank you. Serena Ojakian, Kathy Howe, Kimber Gage. Kathy Howe? See, you thought you had 3 more minutes, 2 more minutes. Get up here.
Hi, my name is Kathy Howe. I'm here in 2 roles. I'm a parent of 2 students, one who's an 11th grader at Pali and another who's in 5th grade. So I've been at Ohlone for 12 consecutive years with just 2 children. I'm also here as the Farm Council co-chair. So I'll speak first as a parent of 2 gen ed students. My sons have benefited, makes me emotional too, so much from being table mates with our neurally diverse classmates, playing on the playground. They go to the farm together. I mean, it is powerful. My kid learns from them. They see them as peers, as teachers. I mean, it is amazing that my students get to benefit from these wonderful group of kids. Moving them to another school is not okay. And the relationships they've forged have been impactful. And as also, I'm a Farm Council co-chair, and I've been that role for how many years now? 5? 5. Jennifer was my co-chair in previous years. But I'm here to ask you to rethink this decision because our SPED students benefit from the farm. They interact with these animals. They dig in the dirt. They plant plants. They eat the food that they grow. That's not going to happen at Nixon. They need this opportunity and this unique outdoor classroom. So I add my voice to all these other more articulate and wonderful voices to push pause on this and this decision and stand for inclusion and stand for diversity and keep these kids at Ohlone. Thank you.
Ms. Hall. Kimber Gage, Magda, and then, we added another one. We have to cut it off. That might have shrunk it to a minute. And then Andrew. Kimber, Magda, Andrew.
Hi, I'm Kimber Gage. I'm a new parent in this district of a kindergartner at Ohlone. You got me into the board meeting, so here we are. I'm participating. My child is a neurotypical learner, but just as Kathy mentioned, as many others, there's true value to have different voices, different learners, different people, different diversity. And, you know, there were slides earlier that Palo Alto Unified School District stands for equity. And there was a big sign, equity. And this is not showing that in this decision. Ohlone is a choice school, and by making this decision to not have special education at Ohlone, you are therefore not being equal in that choice, in that decision to have parents go in the lottery, just as all of, you know, we did who are there. So anyways, with that, I just want to urge you to talk to parents not only in room 19, but all of the parents. I am so disheartened to learn that my 5-year-old is not going to, for 5 or 6 years, is not going to experience children who learn differently from him. And I think that's just a disservice, so thank you.
Thank you. Magda. Is Magda here in person? I need help with your last name, Magda, I'm sorry. It's kind of exactly how it looks.
Hello. My name is Magda Kruczkowska. I'm a Ohlone parent, and I wanted to make a comment about the presentation about the special ed restructuring. So one striking thing about the presentation is that the decision-making was made by many professional directors and specialists, but completely excluded the biggest specialist of the special ed kids, their parents. I think this is the group of people who knows the most and the best about what's best for their kids. I'm an Ohlone parent. My child is not in the moderate severe group, although my child has IEP. She's a 4th grader. She's in her 3rd elementary school. And I have to say that in Ohlone, we found peace, tranquility, and I think this is the school that really brings happiness to not only my child, but my entire family. Any smallest change for a special ed child, any atypical child, is huge and affects child, entire family. So I hope that this proposed change never happens, because it will have a humongous, terrible impact on children and their families. Thank you.
Last commenter is Andrew Mulholland. Is Andrew here? Okay.
Hi, so I didn't plan to speak tonight, so sorry for not having a prepared speech. I wanted to share the impact of this on students and families who are not yet in kinder. My kid is at Greendale currently. He's in the wonderful forced inclusion class. We see directly the benefit of having neurotypical and neurodiverse kids working together, learning from each other, and becoming stronger together. We're in the process of applying for kinder for next year. We've applied for the choice program at Ohlone, and the impact of this is we're right in the middle of the registration process, right in the middle of the lottery is next week. And now we don't know if we'll even have a choice for next year. And the impact of this is really harmful on families, taking away a choice from families, and it's going to have an impact not just on the neurodiverse kids, but as many of the other parents have shared tonight, it's going to have an impact on the neurotypicals too. Please, can you pause this? Please, can you reconsider this? Because it's not fair, and it's not right, and it's harming our most vulnerable population. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all of our commenters, for your comments. Oh, I see lots of hands here. Mr. Collins, I don't see you, so if you have a comment, I need you to say something or raise your hand or something. But I'll start with Ms. Siegel.
Can I start with a question and then make some my first question is, how were families and teachers at Ohlone and Escondido engaged before this decision was shared last week? In one of your slides, it was stated that it was a collaborative approach. And so before I just want to hear how, that's my question. And then based on your response, I have some thoughts.
So we work very closely with our Community Advisory Council for Special Education. So the conversation about the restructure and consolidation of our moderate to severe learning centers was discussed at our CAC meeting on January 23rd. So of course, at that time, we were not naming schools. We were talking about, again, what we are tasked with under IDEA is providing the best and specially designed instruction for students to promote learning. So we talked about how students would benefit from the primary and intermediate models without naming schools. At that time, our Community Advisory Council was in favor and support of that idea. So that is the parent community that we partnered with and that we collaborated with in advance of this decision.
And were Ohlone and Escondido parents invited to attend this? Like, did they know about this meeting? And did they know what was on the agenda? Was this spread widely? I'm just trying to.
Right. All of our families are invited to the CAC meetings. So Rika, who is our... Rika, who spoke earlier, she is our CAC chair. She communicates the meetings. Again, families are always welcome to attend CAC.
And is the agenda, I'm new, so I'm asking questions. Is the agenda for these meetings, is it shared like ahead of time?
I would have to get back to you on that because again, since Rika puts out the agenda and the communications, I would have to check in with her.
Okay. Thank you so much for answering, because I'm, so like for me, reading through everything, I've been thinking a lot. And my number one priority since day one, and I've said this a lot in the fall, but I'm gonna say it again, is to build back a collaborative community. As without collaboration, I feel like trust is broken. And without trust, I feel like our community is fractured. As with other buzzwords that have become all too familiar, it may be that the term collaboration might mean different things to different people. And so for me, collaboration is not an act, it is a process in which staff, parents, student, teachers, and the community are committed to working together in a sustained fashion to accomplish a shared vision. And I recall last fall how surprised and upset many parents at my children's school, Palo Verde, were to discover that it would be moved the following school year to Greendale. We discovered this for the first time by reading about it in the weekly newspaper. Now parents of children with moderate or severe autism are being told in February that their children will have to leave their schools at the end of the school year, which is much more significant than the Palo Verde move. And I suggest that this is not how to build back a collaborative community. What seems to have been forgotten in some decision-making affecting Palo Alto's schools, including this recent restructuring, is that the voices, experience, and knowledge of parents who have children in Palo Alto schools need to be heard in a timely way in order that they have an opportunity to contribute effectively to important decision-making. I want to be very clear, I support the goal of having K-2 and 3-5 split classrooms, and I want to thank our staff and leadership for their guiding principles to support our students in special education. But I believe that one of the guiding principles should be collaboration, and I believe that to collaborate, we need to solicit input from the community, from our teachers, from our parents, from our students, and from the neighboring community. And I feel like we should factor that into our decision-making. I also want to be abundantly clear that I firmly and wholeheartedly believe that our district staff and superintendent have the best intentions for our students. I want to make that clear. Nothing I'm saying should in any way imply that those responsible for making these difficult decisions are not committed to the welfare of our student population. Yet the missing piece here was effective community-based collaboration and communication. The PAUSD promise under special education specifically states that one of the goals is improving parent engagement with the goal of, and I'm quoting from the website, building effective partnerships that foster communication between families and the district, Key strategies include increasing parent engagement with an expectation of listening to learn throughout the staff. We need to keep our promises. Only by seeking input from our stakeholders and providing information early do we truly solicit points of view from our community, parents, teachers, students, other interested individuals who might draw upon their personal experience, education, knowledge, or even innovation. I think we must do better.
Mr. Collins, did you? Would you like to go next? Okay, Mr. Rock.
Can I really quickly answer Ms. Siegel's question before you go?
Sure.
Because I actually know the answer. The CAC, the agenda is public on the CAC website, and it's always published ahead of time, and all school sites have a CAC representative except Ohlone.
Okay. So that was, it
I
was
think
important for
part
me.
of-
I didn't know what that
I
meant.
think-
And okay, so that's important
Not that
to know.
that's the only
Thank you.
problem, but I think part
Okay.
of the problem may be that there's no one at Ohlone telling parents, hey, come
Okay.
to this meeting with this agenda where this is being discussed.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
I also think, and CAC is great, but I think as we heard at the CAC meeting, the specific schools hadn't been decided yet, right? So I don't think that would have helped either. Question I had was, what are the alternatives that, if impacted parents come to you and say, hey, this is an issue, what are some of the accommodations or alternatives that you're thinking of when you say that?
You mean moving into next year?
Yeah.
So next year, again, we have 5 elementary campuses that are slated to have our moderate to severe learning centers. So I just wanted to clarify that again, even though we're moving Ohlone to Nixon and Escondido to Barron Park, families can work with us to say, closer proximity, or we have family in the neighborhood, and to choose another campus. Something else, I worked with one of our Ohlone families, is looking very specifically at the goals and services on a student's IEP. So we look at what percentage of the time the student is in general ed and special education, and again, what are all of our programs from the mild moderate to the moderate to severe that can help best support our students. So those conversations are very individualized as outlined on their IEP, and again, we're committed to meeting with each family to talk through those different options and look at the specific goals and services on their IEP.
Great. I think that on one hand, it's true that there are high-level, long-term decisions that are staff decisions that are made in the best interest and with a lot of thought. And I fully think that this is one of them in terms of looking at the long term. But it does seem, especially after hearing from parents, that there are some number of families, at least the ones here today and perhaps more, whose students are going to be affected in significant ways. And the question is that going to undermine the ultimate goal, which is we're moving these students to another school for their sake. Mm-hmm. But by moving them to another school in the middle of their school experience at Ohlone or Escondido, are we not undercutting that in some way? So the thought that I had was, and the other issue too that I see is, I'm a little concerned about the fact that we have families who've made the decision to go to a choice school in our district. And it's very hard to get into a choice school. It's equally hard to get out of a choice school. But we're moving them out of a choice school. And that's a little bit of a problem, it seems like. But all that aside, the question I have is why not phase this? Why not have it so that over the next 5 years, new students coming in won't go to Ohlone or Escondido, they'll go into a program that's, as you've outlined. But for the existing students at Ohlone and Escondido, we phase them out until they've passed 5th grade. So there's no disparate impact on the students who are already in the programs there, and yet we're moving into a program that, by all accounts, is going to be for the best interests of the students, special education students in our district. I think it means that the district will have to eat the cost a little bit of a duplication of resources for 5 years. I personally am okay with that. I don't know how my colleagues feel about it, but it doesn't seem like that would be a great amount of cost, and you'll tell me if I'm wrong. But it just seems like in an area like special education where we are so glad to have brought you both in to shepherd this change in the program, because we haven't allocated really sufficient attention and resources and energy and intention towards those families in the past. It seems like there might be a more intentional way of softening the blow in terms of phasing. So, I mean, is that an option? Is it an option to phase the program so the current students aren't impacted, but new incoming students are?
So it's definitely an option. I think one concern that I have in that is that, again, as we mentioned, if we play this 5 years out and we no longer accept kindergarten students, by the time our current kinders are in 5th grade, they're now in a learning center of like 1 or 2 students because we faded out all of those older students. And again, for our students that are spending 80% or more in the learning center, they've lost that opportunity for collaboration, for small group instruction when you're phasing out the program because you're weaning out the population as they get older, and it could be a class of 1 or 2. And so it's just a concern I have in terms of students that are spending the majority of their time in the learning center.
Sure. And one option in that sense is to flip the script on the alternative options and say, all right, the presumption for existing families is you'll stay, but year after year, you can decide, let's meet and decide, do you want to now transition over to what we have started at Barron Park or Nixon for incoming Ohlone or Escondido families? So, I'm curious to hear what my colleagues think, and I know that this was a staff decision, and far be it from me to get out of my lane as a board member, but I think we've heard from families. I think as a board member, we haven't done a great job in the past of making sure that our special education families feel like they're listened to and heard. So I'd like to take this opportunity for us to think about it a little bit and see whether there are any other options for us to accomplish the goals you've laid out while also protecting the families and students existing at those schools.
Mr. Collins.
Thank you. This item brings a lot of thoughts and a lot of memories back to me. For many of the families that are there, I'm an old timer, so I was first a special ed parent in a mod severe classroom 19 years ago, and we struggled to find a program for our child, a classroom that worked. I think we were in 3 different classrooms the first 3 years, not because we were being moved around, but because we were looking for the right mix and the right situation that worked for our child and our family. And so anyway, I've been involved with the Mod Severe program in Palo Alto for a long time, and I've known a lot of families. I've been involved with the CAC. I've been the board liaison to the CAC the last several years and know a lot of families through that. So I definitely identify with the families that spoke and understand the frustration. I think, as I've said to my colleagues, it's very hard for people who don't have a mod severe child, don't have a child who's got a significant disability to really understand the lives of those of us who do. And I think you probably get tired of hearing me say it. I think most special needs families are hanging by a thread. And so an unwelcome disruption in a situation that you thought was nicely settled, I can very strongly empathize with the families that are feeling feeling put out by that. That said, I also am I'm very struck by the importance of what's being proposed here. I gotta say, I was shocked. Thank you for putting up the slide, Ms. Boyce. I did not realize how many K-5 mod severe classrooms we now have. It was almost all of them. If my son was never in a K-5 mod severe classroom, all the classrooms he was in his entire time in school were either a grade span of 3 or fewer. And the idea of a K-5 classroom, both for the children and for the teacher, is mind-boggling to me. That seems like a task that's not likely to end well, and I certainly see the need to move to a situation where we have more focused classrooms to serve mod severe kids more effectively. And to me, that's when I think about how to prioritize the various goods that are being discussed here, because let's be candid, like so many things that we talk about, this is not a choice between here's a good thing and here's a bad thing. It's a choice between two good things. I mean, we would love to have a Mod Severe classroom at every school. We would love to have integration of Mod Severe kids at every school for the benefit of both the Mod Severe kid, for the special ed and the gen ed kids. That would be great. On the other hand, if given the number of kids we have and the number of schools we have, that puts us forces us into operational setups that are way suboptimal, that just don't work very effectively for the kids and the teachers. And so I totally get why we want to move in this direction. And I gotta say, based on my experience in this area, I'm very supportive of it. I agree with the people who said, and my heart goes out to the parents. It's like, this is very disruptive. They don't like it. They find that they thought they had something that was great, that really suited them, and now they're finding that it's not going to be available. Super frustrating. And they feel like they were told about it rather than being consulted about it. Also super frustrating. But I keep coming back to what's our main goal here? Our main goal is to offer the best possible program for our kids who need it the most. And I feel like the staff proposal seems to me to be the approach that's going to let us do that. So I'm sympathetic to the families, and I am one of you. And I'm happy to talk to people about it afterwards. If you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to get together. No one asked to get together, but if anybody wants to get together, I'd be happy to do so. But I do think it's, I center the needs of the special need kids to be in classrooms where they're going to have the best shot at being successful. And I think the proposal that I'm seeing about more focused classrooms seems to me to be the one that's likely to serve the vast majority of kids most effectively. So thank you for the opportunity to comment, and thank you for all the families that came in. It's great to hear your voices. I think it's important for the board and the community to hear from you. Thank you.
Ms. Lederberg.
Yeah, I also just want to say thank you so much to all the parents who spoke tonight and who wrote to us. I can't speak from personal experience like my colleague, Mr. Collins, but I do have so much empathy for your concerns and your frustrations. My guiding principle as a board member is to always do what's best for students. And I try to tune out all the other noise and just focus on the impact of kids. They are my North Star. And for me, what's best for students that means what's best for students as a collective body. And probably the hardest part, I will say the hardest part of my job as a board member is the reality that what's best for students as a whole, and in this case, the whole being the Mod Severe students in our district, what's best for students as a whole is never best for every individual student and family. It never is. And what that means is that virtually every time we or staff take an action or make a decision, we are leaving some people somewhere on the continuum of frustrated to furious. And that is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for us as board members. It's heartbreaking for me as a parent. As a parent, our job is to look out for our own individual kids. And as board members, when I'm a parent, I look out for my kids. As a board member, my job is to consider every child. And no matter how empathetic I am to individual families, I can't let that empathy prevent me from doing what I know is right for the student body as a whole. So I echo the comments of my colleagues. I support staff's proposal because I'm confident it's what's best for kids. And frankly, I think it's long overdue. And I don't know all the reasons why it's taken so long to implement, but I suspect a large part of it is what we're hearing tonight, how challenging it is for parents and families of these kids who are the most vulnerable in our district. So, you know, if we don't move forward, or if we delay doing so, or if we modify somehow, I'm really concerned that we're intentionally depriving those most vulnerable students of a change that we know is best for them. And I can't do that. That's the opposite of my job. And we've heard, you know, we've heard from a lot of Ohlone parents tonight, all Ohlone parents. If we were moving Nixon instead, we would not be hearing from any Ohlone parents. We would be hearing from all Nixon parents. So, what's that? Yeah.
We're not actually going back and forth?
Yeah.
Do you have more comments?
Yeah. We have to consider the impact on all students equally. So I'm confident that this change is best for kids, and it's also a change that's been talked about for years and years and years, and I think that might be part of, you know, clearly there was a communication breakdown. I think that
Right now, she has the floor, and you guys had your chance to make public comments. You can email us if you have further comments, but Ms. Ledemaric has the floor.
It's okay, though. I mean, I get it. And I think that we're always, you know, working with staff to try to continually figure out how to engage more effectively with the community. So that is, but I think one of the issues is that I think part of what happened here is that this has been around for so long. I think one of the callers said it's been 10 years ago they were doing parent surveys on this and consult. So I think the idea that that splitting the ages is better for kids is sort of been accepted as true. And so maybe that took staff a little by surprise, maybe, that it felt new and out of the blue to people. So I guess those are my comments.
Thanks. Thank you all for being here. Many of you I know from Ohlone days. And I appreciate all the comments. And it seems like there's near uniform agreement. I could be wrong here, but it sounds like staff, including our teachers, have long advocated for a K2, 3, 5 restructuring. I don't hear anyone arguing against that per se. I think that that's not really the question, right? It really comes down to the location of the classes. As an Ohlone alum, I totally relate to everything. I mean, a farm council chair for 3 years, right? This is, I know the benefits of the farm. So as an Ohlone alum, it feels like, wait, why would you leave Ohlone? It doesn't make any sense. And like Ms. Ledemaric said, if it were flipped, I know, I mean, whenever a school is impacted, we hear from that school for sure. But I think the question becomes then how we make decisions about where the program's going to go. And I hear you, Mr. Drop, about, you know, can we sort of slow roll it and whatnot. And the question I have then is, we've been hearing for the past 2 years that it's really, really hard to find special ed teachers, especially high quality ones. What I don't want is to maintain what we have now and that means we would need more teachers because we would need a K2 at each site, 4 more teachers or whatever, just having a warm body in a room. That's not what I want for these kids, and I don't think it serves them well. So that's a concern of mine. And the other question is then the added expense of spending that money, that might be totally fine with us, but I would actually want to look at, I mean, talk about input. That's a time to say, wait, that looks like that's going to be about $700,000. Is that the number one thing that we want to spend special education dollars on? Maybe it is, but maybe you'd be like, oh my God, no, there's this thing we've been wanting to do for years we haven't been able to do, or parents would say that. So the idea of just keeping K2s at every place and expecting that we're going to find 4 more high quality special education teachers and that we're going to allocate that money and that's the best use of resources, I'm not ready to make that decision. This isn't a decision for us to be making, but I am curious as to if that's something that you think makes sense. I assume not, because you didn't propose that. that we keep a K2 at every site. I know you also mentioned there could be like 1 or 2 kids in a classroom, and that's not necessarily so great for the student either. So I think, I'm not sure we needed to do more community input in the, hey, should we go to a K2, 3, 5? I think there's kind of uniform agreement on that. The question then becomes, how do you decide what site? And Ohlone is unique, and I think it will be missed if they leave there, and Nixon would miss it if they left. I wonder, as we have this conversation, if the reason why it's taken 10 years to get here is because this is what happens when you restructure. Change happens, and no one wants change to happen. It definitely makes any elementary school that doesn't have an SAI classroom is missing out on an opportunity, right? Any school that doesn't. And we've always had 5 of them, and now we could have 7 of them. And there are other ways that they have diversity, right? But certainly there's a benefit to all students. I don't want to prioritize those students over what's best for our mod severe students. If there's something that would serve them better, then I want to center those students, even if it means that now my kid doesn't get to be around, not neurotypical kids. Because that's a benefit as well, but their needs are more important. So I don't know what the next steps are going forward. We don't have a vote here. I think we've heard from the community that there are concerns. I do appreciate, one of the places that I've seen it change is in the past, at times we have told people of a decision that we think is a reasonable decision to change or restructure K2, 3, 5. And that's just been it. And so here, you anticipated and acknowledged, hey, what about siblings? What about transportation? What about disruptions? I hope conversations are happening with teachers about what is this particular student going to benefit from? What is this particular student going to struggle with? That kind of thing. So in that sense, I think communication and input are better. Because I don't think it would have made sense to go to the community and say, hey, should we restructure this program? Right, I think the restructuring, everyone agrees, is the thing to do. So I think knowing where community input makes sense is important. Delaying this for another year probably means then kids will start kindergarten somewhere and then have to change. So we're just sort of passing the buck as to who's going to change, unless we're forever going to keep this many K2s and 3, 5s, which I think you're saying there aren't enough students to do. Is that what you're saying? That having 7 locations with a K2 and a 3, 5, there just aren't enough students. Right. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
That's really the choice then. The choice isn't between keeping all the elementary schools where we are and splitting the ages or this current plan, because there aren't enough kids to do that first option.
Right.
So if we're going to restructure and split ages in a way that there seems to be uniformity, that's better for students. If we're going to do that, we have to consolidate.
Exactly. So surrounding districts, best practice in our moderate to severe learning centers is typically 8 to 10 students. That's the enrollment we've always strived for. Currently, out of our programs, we have a range of soon to be 7 to 11 students. So again, by having that K2, 3, 5 on every campus, we're reducing that number to 3 students in each class. And again, just as, commented earlier, that's a missed opportunity for our students too, who are spending the majority of their day in the Learning Center, to not have that small group instruction, not have that peer opportunities.
And it is one of the reasons why you did not settle on Ohlone because there's not enough room at Ohlone? Or, I'm sorry with the mask on. The fact that you didn't settle on Ohlone, is there room to do it at Ohlone? Or was it purely geography?
No, so there was many different considerations. So we actually did, communicate with our site leaders. We looked at the different campuses. Right now at Nixon, we have 1 Mod Severe Learning Center. The teacher is utilizing 2 classrooms that are right next door to each other, and there's other available classrooms right next to that current learning center. So again, you want the 2 teachers to be nearby. You want them to collaborate. In conversation with Ohlone staff, we would have to move classrooms, disrupt other classrooms in order to provide that space, and overall, there is less space at Ohlone.
Okay. That's not true. And our teachers, our special, our mod severe teachers, for the most part, are on board with the restructuring, right? I mean, probably no one wants to leave their community, but they want the K-2, 3, 5.
Yes, and again, back to my presentation, in speaking to our most veteran and experienced teachers, they have communicated, they have looked at leaving the district, which we certainly want to retain their talent because it is highly unusual to have a kinder through 5th grade classroom. It's very challenging for that teacher.
Did you have something else? Shauna, Mr. Durant, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. This and similar things in the past, we always have a postmortem on them and say about, we have communication issues, but I don't think communication was the issue here. Because I think this was a staff decision, and I think it was a decision that was made intentionally. I think there's no disagreement from the board, at least that I hear, that the decision is the right decision for the program, right? And I'm in agreement there too. Where I disagree is the way that the decision is going to be implemented, which is, we sort of have two modes of doing decisions, right? I mean, implementing them. There's the rip the Band-Aid off, where we do it and we make the change because it's going to have the least long-term impacts, or at least the impacts won't linger, right? It'll be a period of discomfort and then we'll change. Then there are issues, there are times when we pilot things and we phase things because those require a little more input and long-term minimizing of disruptions. This is not the same, but when we canceled prom, right? Great, rip the Band-Aid off. It sucks, but that's not something where we're gonna, have this linger for months. But it strikes me that ripping the Band-Aid off, especially when we're talking about our mod severe population, is probably not the best approach considering the impacts it has on the families. And it's doubly so when we talk about choice schools. I sort of can't get I'm trying to wrap my head around this idea of, we've got folks who got into this choice program, and at least one person, maybe more, who moved in Palo Alto, which is very expensive to do, I'm sure, to go to this choice school, and now they're being moved out for reasons that are good in the long term for the good of the program, the good of our students. But in terms of thinking about ways to blunt the impact on existing students and making sure that that disruption isn't going to undermine our goal, at least with respect to those students, I really, and I get why phasing is not, why folks don't think phasing might be the right idea, but I still can't help but ask whether there's any sort of phasing type solution. We could think of it as alternative options, but any type of alternative options that would allow families in existing schools to continue in those existing schools while we implement this. As Ms. Loudermilk said, this is like 10 years in the making, right? So if we spend 4 years rolling it out, what is the impact going to be? What is the negative impact going to be on our students versus the positive impact of not disrupting the student in the student experience for these X number of students currently at Escondido and Ohlone?
When I think about the number of students, we're talking about 4 different schools that are impacted, right? So it's 4 K through 5 classes. So if we paused it, then that's all the students in those 4 classes who aren't getting the benefit of this program for all those years that we know is better for kids. That's the part that I can't get around, is how do we deny those children that benefit? Because I get you, I'm empathetic with the desire to grandfather people in, but I can't get around how we deny, it's like we're choosing some kids over others. That's the part that I just can't get my head around. And it's so many kids that would be impacted.
I don't think that's...
If we had spent 2 more years developing this program, I think we'd be having this conversation in 2 years, but 2 years would have passed. And it's sort of like, the 10 years we spent developing this program, it's true that it's great and we should implement it now. But again, I just don't know how severe is the impact going to be on all of our mod severe students as compared to the disruption that it'll cause. I don't know the answer to that. And Ms. Loudermilk, I think that's a good point. I don't know if you know the answer to that too, but I at least want to know that was part of the consideration in making the decision, and that folks thought about, could we phase this, and why can't we phase it if we can't? Because that's important. It's important, I think, for us to do.
And I just wanted to, sorry, I don't know if you can see me.
Ms. Siegel.
And yeah, I echo that, but also I just kind of want to stand by like my view, which is that in making decisions which affect these families, I see benefit from hearing from parents, from hearing from the teachers before making these decisions. And I would be saying this regardless. Yes, I went to Ohlone alum myself, but I would be saying this regardless of which school, though I think having the choice does add an extra level. But I, as a new board member, have benefited so greatly from meeting with as many people in the community as I can, as many people in the district office, as many schools as I can. And I value hearing different viewpoints, and also in that process, for the schools that may change, to go visit. Perhaps if, I'll use this example, if the Ohlone families, spend time visiting Nixon or Nixon Ohlone ahead of time, these parents might say, hey, actually, now that I'm seeing this, I didn't initially want it, but I see how these two classrooms right next to each other at Nixon with this principal who has a lot of background in special ed, I think it can change people's views, and it can soften the impact when there is time given before the decision-making for parent input, and also to look and explore the different options so that when they receive this in a Zoom or in an email, it's not, oh my gosh, I've never seen this before, my voices haven't been heard. So I just want to say, I wish that it happened, and I'm sad that it didn't.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for staff? Okay. 7C, the California School Dashboard Report.
We're going to turn this one over to Mr. Moore, who will take us through, along with Ms. Penny, our dashboard data and some of the things that we'd like to draw your attention to.
Are the audience allowed to ask questions? Because people have their hands up. I don't know the answer. So can you maybe, people have their hands up. Are people allowed?
Sounds good, thank you. So we have a couple key takeaways on the California dashboard that was recently released to us. We'll go pretty quick here because I know that everybody's read our presentation already. So the couple key takeaways that we have that we're going to focus on tonight are: one, our dashboard looks very similar to how it's looked in past years. That's no surprise to us. We're going to touch on the college and career indicator that is not available on this dashboard, and that's one of our favorite ones that we like to look at. Janine will touch on that in a few minutes. And we're going to walk through the distance from standard and how the participation penalty applies to the academic indicators.
The California School Dashboard provides parents and educators with meaningful information on school and district progress to inform our local plans. In prior years, the dashboard reported performance levels through the use of colors. Performance levels were calculated based on how current year data status compared to prior year data change. Due to requirements under AB 130, the CDE can only display the most current year of data on the 2022 dashboard. Therefore, this year, performance levels will not be reported using colors. Instead, this year's dashboard will report performance levels using 1 of 5 status levels based on the 2021-2022 school year data. The levels are represented as purple cell phone bars and include very low, low, medium, high, and very high. In 2023, the dashboard will once again report state indicators using performance colors with one exception. The 2023 College Career Indicator will be reported using status levels only, and then in 2024, CCI will be reported using performance colors. The dashboard and LCAP plan are part of California's comprehensive accountability system. Dashboard indicators are organized under LCAP's 8 priority areas. 3 of the priority areas incorporate multiple measures from the dashboard, which is why you see priority numbers repeated multiple times. Rather than combining indicators into a single summative result, California uses multiple measures. Reporting indicators separately provides a more complete picture of how schools and districts are meeting the needs of students they serve.
Okay, so now we're going to walk through how the distance from standard is used because it's slightly different than how we normally talk about performance of our student groups, where we talk about the percentage of students that have met or exceeded standard. So the distance from standard is how much above or below the standard line that our students have performed. So with the distance from standard measure on our dashboard, each student is assigned a numerical score of how many points above or below the standard line they have performed. And the standard line is different for each grade and obviously each subject. What's different this year is the participation penalty is added to the dashboard. So what this means is for student groups and schools with population or participation below 95%, a penalty is applied. So, okay, so let's talk about this in real numbers. So if we had a student group of 100 and 90% participation, we would be included in our average score 5 students with a negative 279 for ELA or a negative 247 for math into our average score. So if you can imagine that negative scores dramatically affect an average, that's what's happening. So our real world example of that is with our 2 high schools. So our 2 high schools have scores that are average scores reported that are above or below standard. If we look at our actual testing of the students that tested, the students that tested performed around 120 points above average in all 4 of these buckets, but that is not what is reported publicly on our dashboard.
In terms of PAUSD's overall dashboard performance, PAUSD is performing well in 5 of the 6 indicators. The following slides provide a comparison between the all students student group and the areas to be addressed through the LCAP process. PAUSD's ELA academic performance is very high, with an average of 76.6 points above standard on the Smarter Balanced and California alternate assessments in grades 3 through 8 and 11. Actions are required in the LCAP to improve outcomes for 6 student groups. The dashboard also provides expanded ELA and math performance reports specifically for the English learner student group. Additional data are provided for EL students, reclassified EL students, and English-only students. PAUSD ELs performed 37.9 points below standard, and for context, at the state level, ELs performed 98.5 points below standard. PAUSD's math academic performance is very high, with an average of 68.3 points above standard. Actions are required in the LCAP to improve outcomes for 6 student groups. The math data comparison further disaggregates EL student group data by comparing current EL students, RFEP students, and English-only students in this additional report. PAUSD ELs performed 38 points below standard, and at the state level, ELs performed 122.3 points below standard. PAUSD's graduation rate is the percentage of students who received a traditional high school diploma within 4 or 5 years of entering 9th grade. Overall, PAUSD's graduation rate is 96.3% or very high. Actions are required in the LCAP to improve outcomes for 2 student groups. For most of the other state indicators, the desired outcome is to have a high percentage. However, for the suspension rate indicator, the desired outcome is reversed, and the goal is to achieve a low suspension rate. PAUSD's overall suspension rate is very low at 0.7%. Actions are required in the LCAP to improve outcomes for 3 student groups. As with the suspension, the desired outcome for chronic absenteeism rate indicator is reversed, and the goal is to achieve a low chronic absenteeism rate. PAUSD's chronic absenteeism rate is high at 10.1% and will be addressed in the LCAP reflections as an identified need. PAUSD outperforms the state average of 30%. The English Learner Progress Indicator, or ELPI, shows the percentage of current English learners making progress towards English language proficiency or maintaining the highest level on the English language proficiency assessments for California, the LPAC. Overall, PAUSD EL students are performing at the high level with 63.1% making progress towards English language proficiency or maintaining the highest level on the LPAC, and more information will be provided during a future board meeting.
So there's a lot of data on this slide. Just wanted to point out one piece of this is the state has a program called Differentiated Assistance Technical Support. And this is for districts in which a student group rates poorly in 2 out of 3 priority areas for a particular student group. So for us this year, our homeless student group falls into this category with performing very low on the academic indicators and very high on the chronic absenteeism. So what this means is Mr. Espiritu is already working with our County Office of Ed to kind of work and support the needs of the 22 students in this student group. So the next steps involve using this information, and many of these things are already in progress. And we're glancing over this very quickly because there's a lot of progress indicators and different pieces that we've reported on throughout the year and upcoming that already incorporate this data, and it's really not a whole lot of new in what we're presenting tonight. So with that, thank you, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, board members, questions. I think that Mr. Collins has one.
Thank you. Thanks for that presentation. It's been a while since we've had the dashboard, so it's good to see it again. I don't know if people remember from prior iterations of the dashboard. I'm not a big fan of the dashboard. I think while it tells us some things, it doesn't answer the 2 main questions that I think you want an accountability system to answer. The first being, how am I doing overall? And the second being, am I doing better than I did last year? Both of those questions, unfortunately, that matrix that Derek put up, which I think has 80, no, it has 72 cells, I think, this year. That 72 cell matrix does not lend itself to answering either of those questions. But if you get a spreadsheet and you look at the past year's similar matrices and you compare them, you can actually come up with at least some answer to that question. And the answer here is we're doing about the same as almost identical to where we were in 2018 in terms of the number of those cells that have either high or very high positive rankings. And compared to other districts that are like us, we are not especially well ranked. There are a number of districts that have a higher percentage of those cells, high or very high, than we do. So I don't think there's really sensational news there, and I don't think it's especially actionable, but I do think it is important to keep in mind because ultimately, while we wrestle with all these issues, special education and early literacy, and all the initiatives that we work on, ultimately we should be able to see improvement in this dashboard. We ought to see these cells that are low or very low twink over to being high or very high. And so far we haven't. Now, I don't think that's a disaster because it's been difficult. It's been a difficult 3 years, and it's been hard for everybody to make progress. We're probably lucky to have stayed in place. But I do think ultimately that is one of the measures that we should think about is, are we actually taking these groups that were underperforming in these important areas and turning them into groups that are performing high or very high? And how do we compare to other districts like us in terms of our ability to do that? So, I think it shows that, well, I think we're doing good work. We still have a lot of work to do. So that's it. Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it.
Ms. Siegel.
Just one quick clarifying question, making sure I'm reading this right. Does this say that 51% of PALI students, only 51% took it? I'm looking at the height on the attachment, percent of students tested, and it's in yellow. Is that, before I make I just want to make sure I'm reading it right.
Yes, that is correct. So 51% took ELA and 46% took the math assessment.
Okay. I'm disappointed to see that. I just have to say, I just talked about how collaboration is key. I think collaboration is also parents need to have their kids take the test and students need to take the test. And I went to look again. I was like, let me go check out Lynbrook and San Jose. Maybe this year all these students like decided not to go, but no, theirs was 90-something%. And so I just want to say broadly that this that we should, if we're talking about One Palo Alto and collaboration, let's show up. I was very concerned about the low scores and high chronic absenteeism. And I see that that's something that we are focusing on. And so I hope there's very specific things. I'm glad, obviously, that you said we're focusing on it, but very specific things. And I would want to know across the board, I just want to know what is causing the chronic absenteeism across the board. I don't know. I'm also concerned about the low performance of our Pacific Islanders, Hispanic students, African American students, socioeconomically disadvantaged, and special education students. So just wanting to make sure that we are continuing to keep them at the forefront, but broader terms too. Gun was only 82% as well. That's not something to clap about, but 51%, as I said earlier today, we can do better. So that's all. We have a student.
Oh, look, you guys want to talk about this? That's great. Okay, Mr. Pan.
Okay, yeah, so I have like around 3 points to make. I think seeing, of course, like all the data is a bit discouraging, but I do want to say, at least for the chronic absenteeism, I know that Principal Stratton has been working with faculty to implement a hall pass system, which ideally could help the people that do need a sort of accountability for being like absent and being tardy. I think like it could have a very big impact. And okay.
I don't think you're muted, Mr. Collins.
I mean, like, what am I supposed to? I'm just trying to, like, okay, never mind. I'm just trying. No, I'm just saying, like, part of the, I don't know, at least from what I was hearing from Principal Stratton was that part of the hall pass was to try and help take accountability for it, and it is possible that we can see positive impacts from it. So that's it. And also, I was one of the 11th graders, including Johanna, that took the CASP testing from last year, and I think on a board level, it's very hard to change the culture that we have in our high schools to, like, not take the test or like dodge the test or whatever. But I think it's more of a school-based thing. It's more of a culture thing. And honestly, I have no clue how to change it either. I know last year we tried to give incentives of taking the test, but I know on the board level we try our very best to like change and try to improve the statistics. But I feel like especially for this one, it's very hard because it's more of a culture thing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Sia?
Thank you. I would agree with Daniel. I think culture is a really big part of a lot of PALI issues. I think specifically for this, I'm also disappointed to see low numbers. I did take the CAST test last year, though. But I think, obviously from a student perspective, I don't see this from a more administrative level or from parents or from staff. I just don't have that perspective. But from what I know that it's just not taken as seriously. Like, I remember in middle school, it was mandatory. Everyone took it in class instead of one grade. Every single student would take it. And it was a big deal because everyone was centered around it. But in high school, it's only 11th graders who take it. So it's only a portion of students. And in addition, it's not seen as this big mandatory thing. And I think that mindset is what causes a lot of students to not want to take it, because if they see this as optional, like extremely optional, and parents are encouraging them to skip school or opt out, it's seen as very desirable to get more time to study for tests, more time to stay home and relax instead of taking this optional test. And I think it's just about the marketing of it. I would say I don't want to invalidate the efforts to put incentives around it, but I personally think that approach is not going to be as helpful because it still puts the CASP as this very optional, free-range sort of thing, as opposed to, maybe this is a bit serious, but like a duty, especially since this is very important data for the state, and it really helps to, show what's going on in the school. I see it more as like a duty or obligation, and maybe those are like not great words to say. Students might not like those words, but I think that is kind of what's needed to shift the culture to increase those numbers, because no one's going to be happy and jolly taking the CASP test, but it is something important that is helpful to the state, and that is helpful. I feel like, I'm sorry, I feel like students might not understand the breadth of the situation or how these low numbers can impact data. And I probably don't understand the full breadth of it either, but I know that changing the way that students view the CAS will be very important to increasing these numbers. And while I as a student can't do this myself, and we as students can't all be a part of, or we can all be part of the solution, but we're not the only part of the solution. I know that we as an ASB do want to address this head on. We did talk about this as a class, most of it in publicity and telling students they need to do it. Yeah.
Thank you both very much. Mr. Darup.
Really quickly, I think all the reasons that my colleagues have said that the test is important are important. As a practical matter, I know that there are some number of parents who encourage their students to opt out. And to those parents who own their houses in Palo Alto, I would put forward that, the dashboard also affects Palo Alto's rankings, and the rankings tend to be tied to property values. So in addition to all of the reasons my colleagues have said, there's also a little bit of a practical financial thing to think about in terms of participation in CASP. So I'll leave it at that.
And
Got something else?
that's all as department chair and during back to school night, I would mention it.
Yeah.
And I would put in, it's important to do it. It helps me as a teacher. It helps us as like a department for ELA. But I also did put in that for property values, some people do base where they're living on the dashboard. And so I did also discuss this with parents. So I was just echoing, that's all I wanted to put in.
Okay.
Mr. Brianza, could I just make one short comment?
You may.
Just briefly, I appreciate the student board members' comments because it's great that they recognize the importance and impact of this. I just want to share a data point. The state makes available the participation rate for all the schools that participate in the CASP, and there are about 1,000 general education high schools in the state. Of those 1,000 high schools, Pali High School is in the bottom 4 of all schools in the state in terms of participation rate. So there are 3 schools that are, I think one is tied with us and 2 others are slightly lower. But the vast, vast, vast majority of schools are at 95% and above. And those are, and as the students pointed out, those are kids who are doing their civic duty to provide information that benefits not only the schools and the homeowners in that community, but the way I think about it is all the future students in the state of California. That's who this data really goes to benefit. It's not going to benefit the 11th graders who are taking the test. Their time is done. But this is aimed to benefit all the students, the 6 million students who come after them. So I think it's great that, that's an important message. I think if you can help get that message to students and help them understand how far out of step Pali is at this point, I think that would be great.
Anyone else want to talk about how important this test is? Great. I'm glad that we're moving on. Okay, information items. Does anyone have any they want to pull and talk about? Yes, Ms. Sia.
Hello again. I will be sure to very, very clearly communicate that to students. I wanted to just give a quick comment on the secondary bell schedule for ad hoc committee recommendations, specifically just for the secondary high school, since that's what I'm most familiar with. In looking at the different proposals, there are 2 for the high school, with one that will be changing the advisory and self program. And I just wanted to say, I was part of the advisory and or ad hoc committee, and we just had our meeting like last week, and we did mention this at a few of our meetings about the timing of having advisory and self. I'm not exactly sure how these 2 ad hoc committees have intersected or communicated, but from what I know from our discussions, advisory and self, one of our goals was to increase engagement and community, since from student input, there is a lack of engagement in both of these programs, and we want to be working on that. And timing is a really big part of it, especially moving it to after 7th period on a Friday will be very impactful on student engagement. I know that just generally, anyone on a Friday at 3 p.m. is not really going to want to fully actively participate in things such as college application discussions or working together on something. So I just want to advise against that, since I know it will be detrimental to the goals of the advisory and self programs, and will also, I also assume, might be hard on teachers and staff equally. Of course, I'm just coming from a student perspective. And then there's also the option to split prime into 2 30-minute sessions, which I find to be really thoughtful, because I know that for many years students wanted to go into 2 prime sessions, but I think it would just need to be considered with the ending time, which is something students also really care about, especially with after-school activities and sports, to have that earlier time instead of splitting into 2. And that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Pan.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Johanna's saying. I think definitely having prime self be before 7th period will definitely help with participation. I'd also like to say that before running for this position, I was listening into one of the town halls, and I think the major consensus is that there are these very long periods, like 90-minute periods, because teachers have to switch between schools, and it's easier for, it's just like a lot more convenient. But I do like to say that if we can't have shorter periods, could we at least, I know this might be like more of a site level thing, but could we at least try to implement breaks during the classes? I feel like all students are just, and teachers too, we need breaks in between like these 90-minute period classes. And it could be like very tolling and sometimes distracting to be in a place for like 90 minutes in a row. And also, I think just to bring to light to all of the self programs that we have, since it is in the schedule and it will, I think it's taking place of prime in one of the proposals on Friday. But I just like to say, like, I feel like we do have self programs, and it is very beneficial that we have this idea of like trying to improve like our mental health and our social learning. But I do think that a lot of our students don't really pay attention and focus during self, and I think this is just like a reminder that maybe we can try and like focus more on what we're teaching to the students and make sure that it does encourage collaborative learning and not just a period where students don't have to listen carefully and pay attention. It's just, that's it.
Thank you. Yes.
I wanted to echo that for me, kind of the middle school. It seems, and it sounds like the primary reason for moving to block scheduling was to better align with the high school schedule to share teachers. That concerns me, so I guess I should ask, I was not on the board, was that the primary factor to move the middle schools to block schedule? I can only speak for myself as a student at JLS. I would have struggled with 80 or 90-minute periods, and as a teacher, managing middle schoolers for that long. So yeah, just some background before. Oh, okay, I was like, uh-oh. You are. I was like, here we go. So yeah, can you, was the primary reason to align, and because when I looked through all the notes, it says, in meeting 3, it states middle school teachers express mixed benefits of block scheduling. So I would just love to understand more of this. And then it says in a future meeting that a range of 60 to 90 minutes was proposed, but 60 is very different than 90. So I as a board member would love to see the survey data because it seems very mixed. And then my first question going back to is why did middle school move to block schedule? What was the primary reason?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the committee, but the current schedule is basically very similar to what this, so the change to block schedules happened years ago.
Yeah, so I just didn't know how, just that.
I think that's something we're gonna have to come back with an update on.
Okay.
And I don't want to misspeak on it.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, great. Any other information items? Great, okay, board operations? Yep.
I'll do it quick. Let me just go back to here. I had a pretty busy week or busy month. I visited Fletcher and very excited for their upcoming sustainability program, but it also, learning that middle schools were on block. What also surprised me, it was so nice seeing middle schoolers without backpacks. It shocked me. I felt like something was different, but I just want to really praise the middle schools and this district because once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. It just made sense, but I had never seen it before. And what I also noticed is I like to pay attention during brunch or lunch. Students did not have their cell phones out. They were talking to each other. They were engaged. It was beautiful to see. So thank you to everyone, to the principals, to the leadership who made that happen. I also had the pleasure of attending Game of Throws, a 3-day juggling event at Gunn. It was amazing. I saw Daniel there. My family and I attended. We went to one, and then my children said, please, can we go back? So that was our entire weekend. I want to recognize Mr. Hall, the Gunn High School Japanese teacher and juggling club advisor, for his work in organizing this event, as he was DJ and an MC. And it was, but my favorite part, like we loved the juggling, there was hula hoops. But then he stopped and he said, and this part really stood out to me. He introduced his former student who was on the stage juggling or doing, Chris Garcia. And it was clear in his eyes, there was so much going on, a full audience, but it wasn't about who can juggle the best or hula hoop or skate, I don't know, all the things, but it was clear why he went into teaching, to inspire, to encourage, to build resilience in others so that they could have the self-confidence to pave their own way, and thus, in his words, to maybe even change the trajectory of their life. I'm at a juggling event, but that's what stuck with me. And I also want to recognize Lisa Hall, the activities director at Gunn, for her work in making this event happen, because what happened when I got there, there were little kids, there were older people. It was a great community building event. I also visited adult education and at Cubberley, and as a former ELD teacher and department chair, I was in awe of their robust adult ESL program. I didn't know how robust it was. Every ESL class I visited was completely full, and one of the teachers, and I had to ask you, Brenda Lowell, was in her 80s and has been teaching there for 25 years, and I just want to celebrate and help to spread the word about these free morning, evening, in-person and online ESL programs and classes. So special thank you to Tom Keating, principal, to Lynn Tanner, ESL program manager, for their hard work and for moving from Greendale to Cubberley, because they kept that community intact. Again, I just walked around, I paid attention, but there was a community and it was there. I also visited Preschool Family, which is part of our adult ed, serving families from children 0 to 5, and special thank you to Nicole Manow. She could answer every single question on every single topic. It was a beautiful program to see, and I was inspired by every single aspect of that program. And yeah, I just wanted to really thank her for all of her hard work. Also, I was invited to Gunn High School Wrestling Senior Night, and I want to give a shout out to wrestling coach Crichton, who is also a Gunn PE teacher, and the entire wrestling team for their hard work and strong performance. The only problem is when my 7-year-old son got home, that's all he was doing is and trying to wrestle. I also visited Barron Park Elementary School and thoroughly enjoyed every moment of my visit, and hard to narrow down what to share to only 2 things. But I wanted to just share the fact that the principal, Julie Argumento, does a home visit to every single family in that school. And that stuck out to me, and that she created a school-wide social justice plan, Read Aloud, that is implemented in every grade. And I went and looked through all the books, and now as a parent, I have a better library in my house. And then finally, I just want to thank every single member of this district office for taking time out of your day. I think what you can see is I'm trying to visit every single person I can. I appreciate your time. I know that you are all so busy, but each and every one of you, when I say, hey, can I please meet? I have a lot to learn. Growth mindset, you say yes. So thank you to all of you, and Dawn for meeting with me every week and giving me that time.
Ooh,
Sorry.
go ahead, top that.
Nope. Not even gonna try.
My builder recognition today is actually, I really like to call out a specific person, but given the report that we saw earlier today on ESRI, I wanted to shout out to the elementary school teachers who are the ones that made that all happen. And made it all happen when many of them were in here 6 months ago, very upset about some of the changes we were making. And they made it happen anyway, because that's who they are. So that's my shout out this time.
I wanted to just call out Marcella, our principal at Escondido, who's not here now, but I had a similar thought when you walk around Escondido, partly because it's Marcella and partly because the Spanish immersion program, the entire focus of that school is language development. And so just watching how she just embraces that and supports her staff, and they're doing such great things there, and she's a gem. We're lucky to have her.
Okay, student board reps, anything else? Thank you for your thoughts today, because as Dr. Austin said, it's really helpful for us. Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Happy Valentine's Day.